Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel's Humanoid Magic Weapon. Chapter 81. Gwen said angrily, "Uncle, do you want to be so surprised? Isn't it just a metal ball? What's so exciting?" Iron Man was full of excitement. "What do you understand? You don't know the performance of this metal ball. I'm not even sure if this thing is metal. It's not matter on Earth at all. It's not even within the known periodic table." For this, Fang Tian had already expected it. After all, these are two substances, completely combined under the refining technique, and the devil knows what it has become. Gwen and Pepper are different, though. They were shocked to see that Fang Tian casually took out an object, which seemed to be not a substance on the earth. A thought flashed in his heart at the same time. Could it be that Fang Tian was really not an earthling? In the past, Fang Tian always said that he and Superman came from the same place, but they had never been convinced, and now, they were a little suspicious. Being stared at intently by the two people, Fang Tian was also a little uncomfortable. Surrounded by his own people, he has nothing to worry about. Okay, I will officially explain it now. I, Fang Tian, am a pure earthling, and those Kryptonians mentioned before, M78 Nebula, are just joking. In the past, Gwen was pretty sure of that. But now, she is a little shaken by her own ideas. Seeing the doubtful looks of several people, Fang Tian said again, Okay, I confessed, let's say so. You know, I am a Washa person. I got a secret book of immortal cultivation in Washa, and it is precisely because of this secret book that I have the strength I have now. The material Tony is taking now is also refined by me." Several people looked confused. Only little Pepper hesitated. "You Eastern immortal cultivators seem to be the same existence as the gods. What you want to say is, in fact, you are a god." Tony and Gwen both looked incredulous. "Just kidding, where in the world do gods exist?" Iron Man said with contempt. "You really say more and more outrageous. Don't say it if you don't want to say it. You are the word of God. I am still Zeus, the father of the gods." Gwen and Pepper both nodded. Compared to the gods, it is indeed an alien that is a little more reliable. At this moment, it was Fang Tian's turn to cry without tears. In these years, how come no one believes the truth? However, he really couldn't explain these people clearly, so he simply gave up. "Whatever you want, you can treat me as whoever you want." At this time, the three people on the opposite side were actually blindfolded in their hearts. This Fang Tian, make up an identity in a while, who is he? Thinking about it, Iron Man suddenly came to his senses. "Almost let you go around. I care who you are, you explain clearly. Where did this ball come from?" Pepper asked curiously, "Tony, why do you have to hold on to this question?" Hearing Pepper's question, Iron Man became excited again and talked about his discovery. It turned out that after he brought the ball to the laboratory, he first wanted to scrape off some powder and study its ingredients. He never thought that no matter what tools he used, he would not be able to help this small ball. Curious, he was ready to test the compressive strength of this small ball. Something that made him even more speechless happened. The small ball in the measuring instrument, as the pressure increases, until it reaches more than 10 times the pressure of ordinary steel, and no deformation can be observed. Then Tony got out of his way and removed the instrument's protective device to increase the pressure to the maximum. In the end, the overloaded instruments were smoking and almost exploded, and Tony observed a little deformation. Moreover, when the instrument stopped, it immediately returned to its original shape. At this time, the ball was already embedded on the super hard test bench, which made Tony spend a lot of effort to take it out. At this, Tony danced. "Do you know what this means? The material that makes up this ball, his strength is dozens of times that of steel, not several times, but dozens of times. I even suspect that it is close to the hardness of Captain America's shield." Pepper and Gwen were dumbfounded. In this world, Captain America is arguably the most famous superhero, and his indestructible shield is known to everyone. This seemingly ordinary metal in front of you is so strong. At this point, Fang Tian knew that Iron Man had not tested the limit of titanium crystals, and his imagination was a little exaggerated. Captain America's shield is arguably one of the hardest substances in this Marvel universe. According to Fang Tian's understanding in his previous life, the material of this shield was born in an unexpected situation with vibranium, iron, and some unknown catalyst, and this is the only piece in the world, which cannot be copied, and no one can copy. This accidentally born metal, called the original Edmund alloy, also called sound-absorbing steel, Nirvana steel, refers to a substance. This accidentally born substance is so strong that there is no known way to destroy it. And the true Edmund alloy in Wolverine's body is a product of scientists trying to copy this shield, and the price of making a little bit is extremely high, and the secret recipe is also highly secret, and only a limited number of people in the world know it. Fang Tian suspected that the material of this shield itself alone might be the material of the immortal weapon or even higher, and the titanium crystal in Iron Man's hand was far from this level. Tony finished speaking, and looked at Fang Tian with a blank eye. So, how did you get this thing? Fang Tian said lightly, I made it myself. Hearing Fang Tian's words, Tony was surprised. In his heart, Fang Tian has always been an iron-blooded true man-like figure who can stand on his fist and run a horse on his arm. Even if he hears Fang Tian say that he wants to make a steel armor, Tony is just a joke. Now, Fang Tian told him that he had transformed himself into the world's best material science expert. Are you kidding? Is there a scientist like Fang Tian, who can kill with his eyes? At this time, Tony did not know that in the future, his thinking would be completely reversed. It wasn't until he met the big green man that he knew that there were really scientists in the world who were angry to kill people like mowing grass and calm down and have a very high IQ. After being surprised, he looked forward again. If Fang Tian is really the inventor of this material, doesn't that mean that he also has the possibility of obtaining the formula of this material? Iron Man raised his face shyly. Fang Tian, you said now, are we good friends? Fang Tian looked at Iron Man's appearance, and his heart was amused, but his face pretended to be vigilant. What for? At this time, remember to set up with me. Tony is wronged in his heart. He is a big consortium, the controller of Stark Industries. What has been done by you during this time? Just like that, you are still not satisfied. Do you still want me to help you warm your bed? Thinking of this, Iron Man shivered, and quickly took 2 steps back before he steadied his mind. Brother, you say, in addition to the body, other aspects, as long as I have it, I can give you anything you want. Just you. Fang Tian glanced at Iron Man contemptuously. An old man in his 40s, who do you think can fancy you? Tony was damaged by Fang Tian, and he was already a little used to it, and he had no reaction to the old man's name. What I want is that you can't see it. If you really see it, I still feel dangerous. Tony said calmly, if there are any conditions, you can mention it. Iron Man was open, and Fang Tian was a little difficult. To say that he is now, there is really no shortage of anything. You talk about money. He now has 10% of Stark Industries. Even if the stock price is low now, it is enough for him to use for a few lifetimes. You have to talk about power. This kind of thing is not something Tony can give, and Fang Tian is not rare. Not to mention the future. Let's say that the current Fang Tian, the people in power in the world, few can put it in his eyes. Another day, if he looks uncomfortable and kills him casually, what can the US government do with him? To talk about beauty, according to Fang Tian's current identity, as long as he beckons, there are naturally countless beautiful women willing to pounce. Come to think of it, Iron Man here, there are really not many things that can interest him. One of them is the steel armor. He has long wanted to taste the taste of the steel armor, but with the bet he made with Tony earlier, Fang Tian has long regarded the steel armor as his own bag, and there is no reason to ask for it again. As for the other one, he has been hungry for a long time. That's Iron Man's smart butler, Jarvis. Now although Fang Tian can also order Jarvis, he can only do some basic things, and the highest authority is still Iron Man. Of course, the relationship between Iron Man and Jarvis is no longer just a relationship between an intelligent butler and a master, but a step further, similar to a friend. If you want Iron Man to give Jarvis away, it is impossible. Fortunately, Fang Tian did not intend to let him give Jarvis to himself. After making up his mind, Fang Tian said, it's not impossible if you want the formula of this material, but I have a request. What requirements? Speak it quickly. I'm interested in Jarvis. Fang Tian stopped the Iron Man who wanted to interject. Of course, I didn't mean to snatch Jarvis from you. Not to mention, Jarvis is an artificial intelligence, there is no entity, and I can't snatch him. I just wish I could have the highest authority of Jarvis, alongside you. I think that is an artificial intelligence. he should be stress-free to serve 2 people at the same time. Iron Man was really hesitant about this request. In his mind, Jarvis is not just an artificial intelligence, but more like his friend. But think about the amazing performance of titanium crystals, not to mention large scale. As long as it can be manufactured on a small scale, the benefits are endless. Materials, which can be said to be the cornerstone of machinery, are also bottlenecks. With this high-performance material, it is not known how many high-precision equipment can be developed. In addition, Jarvis was originally created by himself. Even if he gave Fang Tian the same permissions as himself, could he still do something to himself? Thinking of this, he made up his mind. No problem, from now on, you will be one of the 2 supreme authorities of Jarvis. Fang Tian's heart was broken, and he deliberately reminded, you have to think about it, the formula of this material is very simple, I will definitely not lie to you, I can even configure some in front of you for you to study, but if you can't make it yourself, don't blame me. Iron Man is very proud. Fang Tian can be in his room, do not know what simple tools to use, just make things, can he not make it after knowing the recipe and steps? Just kidding, this is also too underestimating his IQ. Don't worry, if I can't make it myself, I won't blame you. Jarvis, Mr. Stark, I'm here, what's your order? Now, I order you as the highest authority. From now on, Fang Tian's authority will also be added to your core, and I have the same authority, they are all the highest authority. Mr. Stark, please confirm that you want to set Mr. Fang Tian as the highest authority alongside you. Once Mr. Fang Tian becomes the highest authority, the 2 have the same authority, and unless you reprogram me, you can't delete the other party's permission. Iron Man, confirm. Okay, Mr. Stark, please wait. The villa was quiet for about 3 minutes. Jarvis's voice sounded again. It has been set successfully, Mr. Fang Tian, the highest authority, please set your title. Fang Tian waved his hand. It's business as usual, it's just, in the future, my actions, without my permission, don't report to Tony. Okay, your order is recorded. This order just now can be regarded as one of the important reasons why Fang Tian wants to get Jarvis's permission. Although from Fang Tian's observation during this time, Tony was not interested in prying into his privacy. But keeping this tale around, I always feel awkward in my heart. Now, this awkward point has finally been solved. Just like the last time he fought with Sabertooth Tiger and Bone Spur, if he had the highest authority of Jarvis, there was no need to blast the camera beforehand. Just order Jarvis not to shoot. Became the highest authority of Jarvis, Iron Man also paid the bill, and now he is looking at Fang Tian. Fang Tian's order did not avoid him just now, and he also heard it, but he was not angry. Just as Fang Tian was not interested in him, Tony was also not interested in peeping into the privacy of a big man. Okay, don't look at it, listen up, I'll tell you the formula of titanium crystal. Tony ordered. Jarvis, record, don't miss a word. Seeing Tony's troubled look, Fang Tian smiled in his heart. How complicated do you think this recipe is? Iron Man said of course. The formula of a new material is, of course, very complicated. The temperature, pressure, input order, ratio, processing method of each material, the duration of each step and the external environment required, etc., etc. If you really want to elaborate, tens of thousands of words and hundreds of thousands of words are not too much, of course, it is better to record it with Jarvis. After a pause, he added, actually, I think it is better for you to write a rigorous and detailed paper, and the oral description is always a little inaccurate. Writing a thesis. Fang Tian was really idle and crazy, so he would do that. He cleared his throat. Okay, whatever you want. Listen, the materials are titanium alloy and natural rubber. After refining, let these 2 materials fuse each other in a ratio of 3:1. So far, titanium crystals are made. Tony, it turns out that you are combining the advantages of titanium alloy and rubber, which is a very simple idea. Although the idea is simple and everyone can think of it, it is very difficult to complete it, so what about the detailed steps? Fang Tian, it's gone. Tony raised his voice. You tease me. Fang Tian, no. Iron Man's face became darker and darker. Then let me ask you, since you said that it is a titanium alloy, what is the specific composition of this titanium alloy? Maybe aluminum, tin, manganese. Fang Tian carefully recalled and patted his head. by the way, there is also iron and chrome. Specifically, you can ask Jarvis, I used the batch of titanium alloy he ordered. Listening to Fang Tian's irresponsible words, Tony's face darkened even more. In the production of new materials, the more accurate the better, where is there such a thing as Fang Tian, who is not even clear about the composition? As for the precise proportioning, it is even more impossible to think about. In this way, he can make a material with such good performance. Is it his luck, or is God blind? Tony asked again, what are the specific steps to bring them together? This is the key, don't fool me. Fang Tian. How to say, just like that, naturally, they are combined. Listening to Fang Tian's words, Iron Man almost exploded his lungs, and his breathing became heavier. What is the answer? Naturally combined. Why don't you ascend to heaven naturally? Did he take half of Jarvis' ownership in exchange for this nonsense? Seeing that Iron Man was about to go crazy regardless of the gap in strength between the two sides, Fang Tian hurriedly said, in this way, I'll make you to see, don't you know? Tony forcibly put up with it. This farce, the two women next to them both saw it, looked at each other, their eyes full of worry. They didn't want two men to turn their faces because of this. Fortunately, there are still some titanium alloy and rubber raw materials in Fang Tian's space, and they can now be taken out and refined on the spot, without the need to reorder materials. When Fang Tian refining before, he was all doing it in his own space, and he was naturally not afraid of being seen by people with ulterior motives. Now since you want to show it in front of several people, you have to find a space that will not be seen by people with intentions. Fortunately, Tony has an underground workshop in the villa, and as long as Jarvis does not let people down, no one can peep. Jarvis, don't let anyone in. Yes, Mr. Fang. In the workshop, Fang Tian took out 300 kilograms of titanium alloy and 100 kilograms of rubber. Samadhi true fire surged out of thin air, enveloping the two materials. Fang Tian's skills were endless, and this time a strange flame suddenly appeared, and several people were only slightly startled, and they became accustomed to it. I saw that the titanium alloy and rubber in the real fire turned into liquid in a few seconds. Body. Tony's eyes straightened. This is not scientific. How did you do it? This flame, in a few seconds can melt titanium alloy. The temperature is at least 4,000 or 5,000 degrees. Rubber should have turned into blue smoke a long time ago. How can it turn into liquid? Body. While speaking, he even reached out to touch the real fire. Little Pepper quickly grabbed him. Are you crazy? Tony came back to his senses and broke out in a cold sweat. If he had put his hand in, maybe he would have become crippled by now. It's not funny that a playboy becomes crippled. Fang Tian laughed. This is not scientific. There are still many unscientific things. He violently urged the Samadhi true fire and saw the liquid in the air. The body shrank rapidly. This time it was just a demonstration. There was no need to make the materials too well, so it was just a matter of refining the two materials to the edge of the second order, and Fang Tian stopped. At this point, only a liquid not much larger than a thumb remains in the air. Body. Tony muttered next to him, is it gasification? What is the purpose of gasifying so many materials? Only a small blob remains. As he spoke, the two materials began to merge with each other. Is it really his grandmother's? Is it a natural fusion? Seeing this, Tony couldn't help but scold a foul mouth. A few minutes later, a sphere slightly smaller than a ping-pong ball appeared in the sky, still red and scalding. Iron Man couldn't wait, so Fang Tian had to take it off and throw it into water to cool down. With a sting, the white mist rose. Tony couldn't wait to fish it out. I saw that this round ball was no different from what he had seen before. Fang Tiandao. Well, just like that, a new material with excellent performance has been completed, and our transaction has been officially concluded. Looking at the ball in his hand, Tony muttered, this is not scientific at all. What is science? Can I eat it? But this time the time is tight, the hardness should not be higher, you can use a laser to cut some off, try to study it, maybe you can really study something. Hearing this, Tony also perked up. That's right, nothing can beat me. While speaking, no one was busy. Fang Tian didn't have much hope for Tony to make titanium crystals, but to be honest, if he was given the choice, he would prefer Tony's research success. If the second-order titanium crystal can be mass-produced, won't his food standard be greatly improved? To be honest, since the titanium crystal was refined, he looked at the small round ball, and he felt very appetizing, but he had been holding back it before. At this time, the second titanium crystal was taken by Tony, but the first one remained in his hands. Anyway, this titanium crystal is useless, why not eat it? As he spoke, the real fire ignited, incinerating the debris that might be on the surface of the titanium crystal. Picked up this piping hot titanium wafer ball, regardless of its temperature, and gently put it in your mouth. Take a bite and fill your mouth. Good, the taste is refreshing, sweet but not greasy, and there are some bounce teeth, the delicious harmony of titanium and rubber, like the finest wine hard chocolate, really delicious. Not to mention Gwen and Little Pepper next to Fang Tian, even Tony, who was busy, was alarmed by the movement here. The three of them looked at Fang Tian, eating with relish, and their faces were full of appreciation, and they swallowed a mouthful of saliva in unison. Iron Man looked at the titanium wafer ball in his hand, and almost wanted to take a bite and taste it to see what it tasted like. What kind of teeth are you old for? Something dozens of times harder than high-strength alloy steel, just chewed up like this. Fang Tian was self-satisfied. Don't say, there is really nothing in this world, I can't eat it. Gwen snorted, what's there to be proud of? It sounds like a rice bucket. Fang Tian's self-satisfied expression was immediately choked back, and he muttered in a low voice, at least it won't have diarrhea. Tony was busy in the lab, trying to replicate titanium crystals. For this kind of professional thing, several people are unaware of it. Just after 10 minutes, Fang Tian felt bored. He knew that the busy Iron Man disliked others the most, so he did not greet the busy Tony and turned out of the laboratory. Immediately after, both Gwen and Pepper followed. After coming out, Pepper said, in the company's affairs, unless it is a big matter, Tony rarely cares. You have not even been to the company. Just now that you have signed the power of attorney, I will take Gwen to the company to familiarize yourself. You guys look at it. For this matter, Fang Tian naturally nodded. After the two women left, Fang Tian observed the materials that were slowly refining in the space. At this time, most of the materials have been refined, and in about 2 days, all of them can be refined. The magic weapon version of the steel armor has entered, and the countdown to the completion of refining. Refining the material did not take much energy. Fang Tian's attention turned and looked in the direction of the saber-toothed tiger. Since he had seen him once on the day he caught the saber-toothed tiger, Fang Tian had not turned his attention to him in the past 2 days. The saber-toothed tiger seemed to have worked very hard 2 days ago, allowing Fang Tian to gain a lot. Therefore, he naturally did not torture the saber-toothed tiger for no reason, so he did not pay attention to him. Just turning his attention to it, Fang Tian was startled. I saw that in the faint light, the saber-toothed tiger collapsed to the ground, already on the verge of coma. Fang Tian's mind turned. He already knew what the situation was. This was carbon dioxide poisoning. In an instant, the wind in the villa outside blew the curtains hunting, and at the same time, a breath of fresh air was injected into the space where the saber-toothed tiger was imprisoned. The saber-toothed tiger's breathing stabilized. Seeing that the saber-toothed tiger's breathing was steady, and his face quickly recovered, Fang Tian was relieved. The prisoner who was hard to catch, if this made him die of grievance, it would definitely make him feel distressed. In the past 10 hours, Fang Tian had not been attacked, but he didn't care, just thought that the saber-toothed tiger was resting. Originally, according to Fang Tian's calculation, the air stored in the space was enough for the saber-toothed tiger to breathe. However, he did not consider that the saber-toothed tiger was an exceptionally strong mutant with strong recovery ability, plus he was exercising vigorously, and he consumed several times more oxygen than ordinary people. And there are other reasons. That is, the concentration of carbon dioxide is already too high before the oxygen in space is exhausted. When the concentration of carbon dioxide is low, there is no harm. Once the concentration is high, it may cause paralysis of the respiratory center, making people suffocate by hypoxia. That is, the saber-toothed tiger has a strong recovery power, and it has changed to another person in space, and it has long been dead at this time. Fang Tian also had some headaches about this situation. After a long time, there may be other enemies imprisoned in his space, and those people cannot all be as resistant to tossing as the saber-toothed tiger. If you accidentally die, isn't it your own loss? This problem should be solved like a solution. Substances that absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen are learned in school. He knocked on his head and thought, isn't it sodium peroxide? Sodium peroxide reacts with carbon dioxide to produce sodium carbonate and oxygen, which can solve most problems just by putting these things into space. Originally, Fang Tian only needed to hand over to Jarvis to do it, but now, Jingji thought about it, just ready to go out and around, and there was no trouble for Jarvis. Sodium peroxide is a thing that is sold in general chemical reagent stores, and it is not a contraband. It's just that the amount Fang Tian needs may be relatively large, and in a store, I don't know if I can buy it all. However, anyway, his original intention is to go out and walk around at will, it doesn't matter. After going out, the first thing Fang Tian saw was the agent of Aegis who was used as his driver. Speaking of which, Fang Tian fought with the saber-toothed tiger and bone spurs that day, and after Jarvis called the police, the reason why S.H.I.E.L.D., not the police department, appeared was the credit of this agent. His task during this period was to stare at Fang Tian, and since Fang Tian moved into this Sea View villa, he had also counted 2 days of peace. Even S.H.I.E.L.D. will not send agents to blatantly invade the villa of the big capitalist Tony, so this agent can only stay outside the villa and watch at most. That day, when he saw 2 people, directly broke the wall with their fists, and entered the villa, he knew that it was another superhuman who committed the crime, and urgently notified S.H.I.E.L.D., which led to the later scene. Fang Tian was ready to come out and wander around at will, and naturally he would not use his spatial mobility ability to rush. In that case, the swish arrived, the swish went home again, and a fart ah. Seeing Fang Tian go out, the agent was also very well behaved, and without him beckoning, he automatically drove the car over. Mr. Fang, where are you going? Fang Tian got into the car. Feel free to drive, let's shop first, and then take me to find a larger chemical reagent store. The agent started the car and hit the road. On the way, Fang Tian casually asked, speaking of which, we have known each other for so long, I still don't know what your name is, why don't you introduce yourself? In fact, the reason why he had known each other like this, known for so long, and did not even know his name was because Fang Tian was originally dissatisfied with the fact that S.H.I.E.L.D. sent someone to follow him. It's just that now, after such a long time, S.H.I.E.L.D. has not made any small movements, but often wiped his ass for him, so he doesn't care about this little thing. That agent listened to Fang Tian's words, and he almost shed bitter tears. After so long, this master finally remembered to ask his name. From now on, he is no longer a passerby, but a horn with a name and surname. Mr. Fang, I am Newton Bethune-Duncan, just call me Newton. What? Fang Tian plucked his ears, thinking that he had misheard, Newton Bethune-Duncan. You're not kidding me. The agent glanced at Fang Tian inexplicably. How could I cheat, mister? How do people call this name? No matter how you call it, it's very dramatic. Maverick, you say, why don't you become a scientist, a doctor, a politician, but an agent? What is this all about? The agent complained in his heart. I originally graduated from S.H.I.E.L.D., of course, I joined S.H.I.E.L.D. As soon as the words fell, there was a bang on the roof of the car, I don't know what was smashed, dented. Agent Newton pulled out his gun vigilantly. A familiar voice came. Sorry, I'm in a hurry. Fang Tian immediately recalled that this was not the Spider-Man Peter Parker who he had not seen for a long time since he went to Afghanistan. Sure enough, a crystal white spider silk shot out from the roof of the car, stuck to the traffic light, and a red and blue figure swung over. Spider-Man is known as a good neighbor of New York, worthy of the name, a great good man. Now this good man damaged the property of the citizens, just apologized and left in a hurry, it seems that he really has something urgent. Fang Tian suddenly became interested. Isn't he just bored at this time that he wants to come out and stroll? Unexpectedly, as soon as I came out in the car, I encountered something. Fang Tian smiled slightly at the agent named Special Niu. Little calf, you have this car, the bureau will reimburse you. The agent suddenly felt that the situation was not good. Did he want another car demolition incident? Fang Tian knew the result when he saw his reaction. Without waiting for him to answer, he rose directly into the sky from his seat. Just listening to the bang, the roof of the Audi has burst from the inside out, breaking a large hole in the shape of a person. And Fang Tian's figure had disappeared. The agent raised his head blankly, looked at the blue sky and white clouds that appeared from the hole, and cursed, Wang Beg. Turtle son, don't even have time to listen to me. Grandpa's car obviously has a sunroof. It's just that Fang Tian has already flown far away, where can I hear his words? And Fang Tian, after breaking out of the Audi, quickly caught up with Spider-Man in front. Levitating behind Parker's back, she gently patted him on the shoulder. Hey Spider-Man, what's going on? Parker looked back and saw that it was Fang Tian, overjoyed. Great, when are you coming back? There is an emergency that may need your help. Fang Tian was also happy. Today is lucky, maybe he can add a new guest to his space. He patted his chest arrogantly. You say, have you encountered some tricky enemy again? Monster, mutants, superpowered, or aliens, it's all over to me. Spider-Man kept moving, continued to spew out spider silk and thanked Fang Tian. Thank you for being willing to help me. It's okay, I'll say it bluntly, if you meet someone who can't figure it out in the future, notify me immediately, I'll help you beat him so that even his mother can't recognize him. Only to hear Spider-Man say again, but this time, it didn't involve the superhumans you mentioned, just a bunch of ordinary terrorists. Ha, Fang Tian was disappointed. Originally, he thought that he would have another collection. Ordinary people, you can just do it yourself, you don't need my help. Parker's face was a little embarrassed. Of course, he was wearing a mask, and no one could see it. If I hadn't met you this time, I'm afraid I really wouldn't have any good way, and I just did my best to rush over. Through the narration of the Spider-Man, Fang Tian knew what happened. It turned out that Spider-Man, in the process of fighting criminals, found a clue to a group of terrorists. After his follow-up investigation, he found that the terrorists were actually using a passenger plane at Kendi International Airport. This group of terrorists colluded with the flight attendants of the passenger plane to hijack a luxury passenger plane and extort money from the rich people on the passenger plane. After Spider-Man investigated this matter clearly, he immediately alerted the airport. Unfortunately, he found out about this one step late. The passenger plane where the terrorists were had taken off, and when the captain tried to return, the terrorists discovered the abnormality and hijacked the entire passenger plane. The US government was very sensitive to the fact that terrorists hijacked passenger planes and immediately sent fighters to intercept them. That's how it is now. The terrorists hijacked the entire plane, hovered near Kendi International Airport, refused to leave, and stalemated with the military's warplanes, which are now helpless. You can't just shoot down a passenger plane like that. Not to mention the hundreds of passengers on the passenger plane, no one dares to guarantee how much damage the wreckage will cause when it falls into the bustling urban area. Although Spider-Man is rushing over now, he also knows that he is probably powerless in this matter. What made him happy was that on the way, he actually met Fang Tian. Fang Tian could fly, which made him call God blessed. After understanding what happened, Fang Tian was not good to ignore. It's just that there is one thing that needs to be solved urgently. It seems that he is going to appear in public today, as a superhero who saves the world. How can he not have his own hero uniform? Fang Tian looked at the materials tumbling in the space and had an idea. While following Spider-Man on his way, Fang Tian focused his attention on the space. I saw two clusters of materials in the space, each of which drew a thin silk thread. The thread stretches longer and longer, as if endlessly. Immediately afterwards, these two silk threads were intertwined and weaved. Fang Tian did not need his own uniform, he had a strong defense, and even, for him, the weaker the defense of this uniform, the better. Therefore, he weaved the uniform extremely thin, using refined rubber as the main material, and titanium alloy wire only as a skeleton and auxiliary. As the thought turned, the entire uniform was completed. Fang Tian looked at this uniform with dark colors as the main color and a metallic luster, and always felt that something was missing. Pondering, he smiled wickedly. Using titanium alloy wire on the Page-Shong breech, he knitted a letter, and only then smiled with satisfaction. Now, there's just a cloak. This is also very easy to do. The red crystal fibers, combined with the fine rubber threads, were intertwined and woven to form a dark red cloak. This cloak seems to be faintly transparent, but if you look closely, you can't see through. This is done, Fang Tian said to Spider-Man. Wait a moment, go and come. In an instant, he disappeared in place. At this time, Fang Tian was already in the internal space formed by himself. It is also mysterious, in his body, the internal space was formed, and now, he himself is in the space. What is the truth? Could it be that the dimensions are different? Fang Tian just thought about it for a moment and put this question to the back of his mind. What about him? Such a brain-burning problem, or let those scientists have a headache, what are they entangled in? It was the first time he had personally entered the space, and the last time he met the saber-toothed tiger was just his projection. However, he already knows his space well, and there is no strangeness. At this time, I saw a tight uniform suspended in midair. Based on a dark tone, Shang front shimmers silver, is an inverted triangular shape woven with titanium alloy wire. In the triangular shape, embroidered with a capital letter S. After the uniform, a dark red cloak, in which there seemed to be a flow of light. In his own space, Fang Tian was equivalent to dominating. He just moved his mind, and the clothes he was wearing had become dust, and at the same time, the uniform that had just been baked was automatically worn on him. The purpose was achieved, his mind moved slightly, and in an instant, he appeared in front of Spider-Man. Spider-Man fixed his eyes and was immediately surprised. What's the situation? Why did Fang Tian suddenly disappear for 10 seconds before he had already changed his clothes? I saw Fang Tian at this time, suspended in midair, wearing a close-fitting tights that highlighted his streamlined muscles. The sword eyebrows are starry, the face is like a crown of jade, and the dark red cloak behind him is unfolding in the wind. The sun shines on him, setting him off like a god. Looking at this uniform that was simply a Superman suit, Spider-Man was shocked and opened his brain. Could it be that you went abroad before to go to the Arctic and look for your spaceship? And now that you know your background, have you truly awakened superhuman power? No wonder Spider-Man said so. It's just too coincidental. Fang Tian disappeared out of thin air for 2 months, there was no news, and when he returned, he had an extra superhuman combat suit on his body, plus his own ability. How could he not make people think? For this misunderstanding, Fang Tian was too lazy to explain now. Besides, the claim that he is superhuman is still circulating from himself and confusing the public. Now everyone doubts his identity, which can be regarded as achieving his original purpose. If his enemies really tried to deal with him the same way they dealt with Superman, at that time, Fang Tian would definitely tell them why the flower was so red. Don't talk nonsense, you still can't save people. Spider-Man immediately shut up. Now that his uniform has been completed, Fang Tian is not interested in slowly following Spider-Man's back. Parker, you are too slow, now is the time to hurry, how about I take you over? Of course it's good, Before the words fell, Fang Tian had already grabbed Spider-Man's shoulder and accelerated. A strong wind rushed in, mugging Parker's words. Fang Tian kept accelerating, and at a certain moment, an invisible barrier seemed to appear in front of him. He pushed a little harder. There was a loud bang, the white fog dispersed. It turned out, he had broken through the speed of sound. The barrier just now is the sound barrier. In supersonic flight, it didn't take long for him to reach Kennedy International Airport. Kennedy International Airport is the most important international airport on the east coast of the United States, with an average of 1 plane departing every half minute during busy times. At this time, over this busy airport, in addition to a hovering luxury airliner, only 3 F-22 Raptor fighters accompanied the airliner. On the ground, except for the reporter who is not afraid of death, the other personnel have all been evacuated and the airport of Norda appears empty. At this moment, Fang Tian flew over from a distance carrying Spider-Man. Soon, sharp-eyed reporters found the figures of the two. Spider-Man is here. Quickly turn the camera around and give a close-up. Suddenly, as if discovering a new continent, some people shouted, "Look! Is the one carrying Spider-Man Superman?" Countless people are in an uproar. What kind of joke? Superman is a character in comics, how can it appear in reality? It's just that the uniform worn by the person flying from afar is almost exactly the same as the Superman of Man of Steel, except for the difference in color. In front of everyone's eyes, Fang Tian put Spider-Man down. Spider-Man looked at the plane in the sky and sighed. It seems that this matter is only up to you. Fang Tian nodded. Don't worry. Soaring into the sky. Spider-Man also sighed below. Such a fast speed, if it weren't for my physique far beyond ordinary people, I would have been shocked to death by him without protection. Indeed, if it is an ordinary person, how can it be possible to directly withstand supersonic flight with his physical body? Fang Tian flew to the sky, parallel to the passenger plane, groaning. Did he teleport directly into it and slaughter the robbers, or did he use the classic action of Superman to tear the plane open a big hole? In a deep sigh, things changed. I saw that the F-22 fighters, which had surrounded the passenger plane, suddenly broke away and surrounded him in the center. Fang Tian naturally knew what was going on. It was nothing more than these two planes, and he didn't know if he was friend or foe, trying to intercept him. However, the two fighters are not in his eyes. After a little thought, Fang Tian decided. Since it has appeared in front of everyone, let's simply choose a way to pull the wind a little. Directly tear open the shell of the plane, go in and slaughter the robbers. Having made up his mind, Fang Tian ignored the fighter plane that was trying to get close to him and leaned in the direction of the passenger plane. Not wanting to be at this moment, the fighter plane on his side suddenly opened fire. The F-22 Raptor fighter is not equipped with a machine gun, but a 20mm Vulcan 6-barreled rotary cannon. This name may not be familiar to everyone, but another abbreviation is like a thunderbolt. It is what people often say, the Vulcan cannon. It can be said that even a steel man, hit by a Vulcan cannon equipped with armor-piercing bullets, will be punched out of a hole with a large bull. In addition, its rate of fire is extremely high, and it can even have 6,000 rounds per minute. Even Fang Tian, who was hit by this cannon without prevention, also stumbled. The reporter below exclaimed. At an altitude of several kilometers, it is not clear to the naked eye, but the camera equipped with a high-power optical lens is clearly filmed. The United States, is it going to war against Superman at this time? Seeing this scene, even the reporters who had been gathered around Parker and tried to interview him immediately pointed their cameras at the sky. Parker saw this scene and became anxious. Fang Tian is obviously here to save people. Why did the US Army attack him? He was on the ground, powerless to do anything about it, and did not know how to contact the military. At this time, he suddenly thought that he could contact the staff of the airport, and these US troops must have contact with the airport. Not to mention Spider-Man's actions. In the sky, Fang Tian, who was attacked for no reason, was annoyed in his heart. However, in front of everyone, it was impossible for him to directly slaughter the pilot. Therefore, he ignored the fighter, straightened up, and continued to walk towards the passenger plane. At this time, the pilots in the fighter, along with all the journalists who watched this scene, were stunned. Could it be that this man in front of him is really a Superman with a body of steel? It must be so. Otherwise, who can withstand the attack of the Vulcan cannon unscathed? The pilot had the intention to let this person pass. Maybe this suspected superhuman wanted to kill the robbers and save the passengers on the passenger plane. But the orders from the command center, he could not but listen. Seeing that Fang Tian still wanted to approach the passenger plane, he immediately opened fire. The Vulcan cannon on the side of the fuselage, in the hum, the barrel rotated at high speed, and spewed out a meter-long fire snake. The palm-long armor-piercing bullets, like raindrops, shot over the dense Chow Fang Tian. For attacks, Fang Tian has always been undodged and eaten hard. With his current ability, it is still easy to dodge such an attack, but for him, the attack is equivalent to giving him experience. Why should he hide? I saw a dense cannonball hit him, and the shell that could have broken a person in two with one shot clanged and hit him, becoming a discus, and fell from a height of several kilometers, spinning down, and I don't know if it will smash the flowers and plants. This time, Fang Tian was prepared, and his figure did not shake. To say that Fang Tian's body, woven with second-order top-level rubber and second-order top-level titanium alloy, the quality of the superhuman suit is really quite good. Even if it is attacked by this dense armor-piercing bullet, it still does not break. When Fang Tian knitted this battle suit, he specially made it extremely close, so that all attacks could be transmitted to him without damage. Now it seems that there is another advantage, that is, most of the power of the attack has been borne by Fang Tian's body, and this battle suit is not so easy to rot. How many shells of the Vulcan cannon can be carried on an F-22 fighter? At the top of the sky, it is about 500 rounds. These shells, in front of the Vulcan cannon, which has a maximum rate of fire of 6,000 rounds per minute, is simply not enough to see. Even if the pilot of this fighter was shooting at a low rate of fire, after a few minutes, all his bullets were fired. Fang Tian sneered. Grandpa didn't fight back, just too lazy to take care of you. Now, you actually kick your nose on your face. That's okay. In an instant, he had broken through the speed of sound and rushed straight at a fighter that had exhausted its shells. The fighter saw that the situation was not good, and wanted to escape. In the air, the top speed of the F-22 Raptor fighter is more than twice the speed of sound, which may be comparable to Fang Tian at this time, but compared to flexibility, the fighter is simply weak. Even if it is 10 times less flexible than Fang Tian, it is a compliment to it. Without waiting for it to dodge, Fang Tian had already rushed onto the tempered glass cabin of the fighter. Fang Tian even had time to smile at him in the pilot's terrified gaze, and only then did he grab it with 5 fingers and suddenly grab it. Under one blow, Fang Tian, a tempered glass cup comparable to steel, directly pierced, and an extra fist-sized hole appeared. The whole piece of glass is also densely covered with cracks, shaky, and it is already the end of the strong crossbow. In the fighter, a shrill warning sound sounded, and the indicator light flashed red. Fang Tian didn't care about this, and with a flick of his hand, he lifted the entire piece of tempered glass and flew away. Looking at the shaky pilot who was hit by the strong wind with a smile, Fang Tian spoke. I said, buddy, are you trying to cause a war between 2 planets? It's a long story. In fact, Fang Tian just approached the fighter in an instant, grabbed it and lifted it, and the time had not even passed 10 seconds. The pilot, without thinking about what Fang Tian's words meant, reflexively pulled off the switch of the emergency ejection seat. The pilot, along with the seat, suddenly ejected from the cabin and flew into the air. Only then did he have time to think about Fang Tian's words. War between 2 planets. That is, he is not an Earthling. So, is he really Superman from the comics who came to reality? That's right, attacked by a machine gun, still undamaged, not Superman, and what? Having figured this out, the pilot was not only not afraid, but excited. I actually fought Superman today. The important thing is that I got close to Superman and was still alive. Fang Tian saw the pilot's escape, but did not pursue. What does an ordinary person do to himself? What interested him was the F-22 Raptor fighter at his feet. He has never eaten a fighter. I don't know what it tastes like to eat a fighter. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but lick his lips a little gluttonously. It's just that it's still in battle. How can you calm down if you don't destroy all those 2 fighters, and your anger at being attacked for no reason? While Fang Tian was fighting, Parker below finally contacted the Air Force, and as soon as the phone was connected, Parker immediately couldn't wait to say, Superman is to save people. Stop attacking. As soon as the voice fell, an exclamation came from the other side of the phone, Flying Eagle 1 has been shot down. Attack. Attack now. Spider-Man couldn't help but look up and see that the pilot of one of the fighters had ejected. He knew that this matter might not be good. Sure enough, the Flying Eagle 2, which was hovering outside Fang Tian, had already made an attack posture. Originally, Fang Tian was standing on his teammate's stand, and he was afraid of accidental injury and did not dare to attack. And now, his teammates have ejected to escape, and Fang Tian has no hostages in his hands, which naturally makes him let go of his scruples. I saw that suddenly, the lower belly of the fuselage of the F-22 Raptor fighter opened, and 2 AIM-120 medium-range anti-air missiles, with fire and smoke ejecting their tails, attacked together. Fang Tian looked at the missiles flying over and was overjoyed. Now, he is worried about how to collect the fighter under his feet into the space, and the opposite side came to cover, and it was really a tacit understanding. 2 AIM-120 medium-range missiles flew at a rapid pace. He himself did not care, but the fighters under his feet could not afford it. Therefore, when the missile was still more than a dozen centimeters away from him, 2 laser rays suddenly shot out from the skin and hit the missile. In an instant, the missile was detonated by the laser light, emitting a blinding fire and a large amount of smoke. At the same time, under the cover of fire and smoke, Fang Tian had already absorbed the fighter under his feet into the body space. It seems that today was not in vain. With the harvest, Fang Tian was happy in his heart. As for the damage from the explosion of missiles, where is it in his eyes? At most, it just made his hairstyle a little messy. The flames dispersed, revealing Fang Tian, who was unscathed. And the fighter under his feet disappeared out of thin air. If he wasn't flying a fighter, the pilot of the Flying Eagle too couldn't wait to rub his eyes. What's the situation? Why did the number 1 fighter suddenly disappear? Even if it is destroyed by missiles, there should be wreckage falling. How come there is not even a little scum left now? Looking at the still stable light spot on the radar, the number 2 pilot couldn't help but be a little skeptical of the command center's order. If this man is really Superman, and they force Superman to the opposite side of the United States, how terrifying would it be? Hesitant, but he was not slow. He was a soldier and could only follow orders. Locking Fang Tian's figure on the radar, in the blink of an eye, the 2 Sidewinder missiles on board the fighter, plus the remaining 4 AIM-120 advanced medium-range air-to-air missiles, had been launched by him. Shooting the missile into the air, the number 2 fighter did not hesitate, made a maneuver at a large angle, and wanted to accelerate away from the battlefield. Where could Fang Tian allow him to escape? Although the missiles that flew over could not hurt him, after all, it was a little annoying, and Fang Tian was no longer interested in playing with them, so he decided to quickly solve the battle. I saw a red light flashing in his eyes, and in less than 0.1 seconds, all the missiles had been shot by his volley. In the sky, 6 huge fireworks appeared out of thin air. However, the cost of these 6 fireworks is really not cheap. The battle between Fang Tian and the fighter, from beginning to end, was filmed by the reporters below. Seeing the flashing red light and the missiles exploding in the air, all the reporters below were as excited as chicken blood. I know, he must be Superman. This will definitely be hot, absolutely can't be wrong. Superman really appeared. This is explosive news. Superman appears, fights with the US military, and our newspaper will definitely sell a big deal and double its sales. Fang Tian naturally didn't know the shock he brought to the reporters below after he used the laser ray. Even if he knew, he wouldn't care and go his own way. At this time, the pilot who launched the missile was just about to accelerate, and before the speed was raised, Fang Tian had already solved all 6 missiles. Looking at this scene, he only felt bad for a while. Sure enough, in an instant, Fang Tian disappeared into his eyes, and only the extremely fast approaching light spots on the radar kept warning him that the enemy was coming. Only, what can he do? This time, he couldn't even lock Fang Tian's figure. In the blink of an eye, Fang Tian had already appeared in front of the cabin. This pilot was also just saw Fang Tian's figure, and without saying a word, he opened the emergency ejection switch. I saw the hatch pop out with a bang, and the pilot with the seat had already flown up. Fang Tian appreciated this kind of knowledgeable person, and even waved to him in a friendly manner. The pilot, but thought that Fang Tian was going to kill him, was so scared that his eyes were closed. For a long time, he did not feel pain, and then he opened his eyes in shock. Thinking about the action just now, even the pilot himself felt blushing. Don't mention the pilot, and say Fang Tian. After greeting the pilot, he casually fished out the tempered glass hatch in his hand, and said with a smile, "Very good, another one, still intact, undamaged. Only, what is the cover to get this fighter into your hands?" Suddenly, his eyes lit up and he had an idea. In the space, a 3-dimensional true fire ignited, steaming part of the clear water he had stored into a white mist. Silently, the white fog around Fang Tian was pervasive, and under the cover of the white fog, the fighter suddenly disappeared. In doing so, of course, he will arouse the suspicion of many people. But suspicion is always just suspicion. When something is in his hands, no one wants him to spit it out. At this time, only the last fighter remained. The warplane followed the hijacked airliner and did not participate in the fight. However, since Fang Tian had already made a move, he was naturally preparing to make a pot end. After all, a sheep is also a herd, and a flock of sheep is also a herd, isn't it? Without saying a word, he flew to the last fighter. This fighter naturally did not sit still. One missile after another was launched, and the Vulcan cannon did not stop roaring. But this is only a futile struggle. All the missiles, as soon as they were launched, had already been exploded by the laser ray, but they blew up the fighter plane again and again, and there was no chance to get close to Fang Tian, and the cannon attack on him was only rationed to tickle him. In this case, what can the pilot who piloted this fighter do? He is not a Hulk, it is impossible for him to suddenly transform and jump out to fight Fang Tian. Therefore, after all the weapons were exhausted, without waiting for Fang Tian to approach, he simply ejected himself. Fang Tianxi smiled. Very good, another fighter has been credited. With the last fighter in his pocket, Fang Tian finally had time to take care of the hijacked airliner. The robbers in the passenger plane had long seen the scene of Fang Tian's hard missile in the flesh, and looked at the miniature submachine gun in his hand, and his heart was desperate. They hijacked this luxury airliner just to blackmail the rich people sitting on the plane, but they had no idea of looking for death. Who would have thought that this trivial little thing not only provoked Spider-Man, but now even the legendary Superman has appeared. How many lifetimes have they been pouring mold? Now, whether the purpose of this Superman's appearance is to rescue or destroy the airliner, they will surely die. Several people focused their eyes on their boss. The boss looked around and said viciously, "We will definitely die, then let the passengers on this passenger plane be buried with us. Kill the captain and co-captain and destroy the entire bridge. I'd rather see if this Superman can withstand the whole plane." Several people knew that this time, they must be lifeless, and after listening to the boss's words, they did not hesitate, and they should be right away. At this time, Fang Tian outside was still dealing with the third fighter. The cockpit of this passenger plane has long been controlled by robbers. The captain who is capable of flying the plane has been killed by them, and now it is the co-pilot who controls the plane. The co-pilot saw a group of robbers rushing in, and suddenly felt bad. What do you want to do? Kill me, and you will die together. These robbers, at this time, already know that they will definitely die. Where will they be afraid of the threat of the co-pilot? A clear gunshot sounded, and a finger-thick round hole had appeared on the co-pilot's brain, which was transparent front and back, and gray brain pulp mixed with blood flowed out. This co-captain died on the spot. The bullet pierced the co-pilot's brain, and the remaining momentum was exhausted, and it hit the console in the cockpit. Sparks splashed, the console flickered, and a shrill alarm sounded. If you don't do it, you don't stop it, and at this time they have no turning back. 5 or 6 guns rang out at the same time, strafing all over the cockpit, sweeping the console to pieces. Even the tempered glass in front of the fuselage was swept into a sieve by bullets. The low-temperature airflow in the high altitude suddenly rushed in, and the air pressure and temperature in the cockpit quickly decreased, and soon, even frosted. Piercing alarms sounded throughout the plane, and at the same time, emergency oxygen masks popped up above each passenger. In the cabin, there was a scene of chaos. The cry was heaven-shaking, and the voice was hoarse. Why hasn't Superman come yet? He was intercepted by the U.S. military. Some passengers cursed. The U.S. military, they should be directly crushed to death by Superman. Why should living in this world plague us? At this moment, Fang Tian finally solved the third fighter. With his keen hearing, he naturally understood what was going on in the airliner. He burst into a shout. All the passengers listen, I'm going in, put on the oxygen mask. This explosion is like thunder. Even if the wall of the warehouse is separated, the eardrums of the passengers in the entire plane are still buzzed by his shock. Listening to this sound, all passengers were overjoyed and hurriedly put on emergency oxygen masks. The robbers in the cockpit looked at each other a few times, tightened the guns in their hands. Even though they knew that firearms could not deal with the monster outside, holding a weapon could still bring them a trace of comfort after all. Suddenly, the tempered glass of the cockpit burst frontally, and the glass shards were overwhelmed with the wind. Needless to say, it was Fang Tian who made a move, and this one blow alone killed half of the 7 or 8 robbers. The remaining robbers were also stumbling, and they were about to be sucked out of the cockpit. Suddenly the Revenant burst out. Superman, help! Fang Tian is not the Superman in his heart, naturally he will not come to rescue them, and even kindly push them, allowing them to experience the pleasure of bungee jumping in the sky. Of course, in their lives, it is estimated that they can only experience this once. The sharp screams became farther and farther away, and in the ears of ordinary people, they gradually became inaudible. But Fang Tian was different. He could even clearly hear those people falling to the ground at the speed of sound, hitting the center of the airport and blasting out several large holes. The ketchup was splattered everywhere, miserable. The reporter below clearly captured this scene. Suspect in my heart, this is not like what Superman did. Fang Tian knew that there were still robbers in the cabin, but he was not in the mood to entangle with these people in the past now. I saw that in Fang Tian's eyes, the laser light flashed away, and all the robbers had fallen silently to the ground. The body fell heavily, causing some passengers who had never seen a dead person to scream. In the cockpit, looking at the sparse console, Fang Tian also had a slight headache. The entire plane, plus passengers, cargo compartments, also weighs at least 200 or 300 tons. If he was on the ground, Fang Tian could still try to lift and look, but in midair, it really made him a little helpless. After all, he has not yet reached the level of a real Superman at this time, and pulling tens of thousands of tons at will is the same as playing that level, at least it is also the level of immortals. With his feet suspended in the air and no support points, he could fly without 200 or 300 tons of thrust. At this time, the situation is already very critical, and the entire plane has shaken violently and uncontrollably, maybe it will fall headlong at some point. Looking at the violently shaking plane, Fang Tian's eyes lit up and he had a way. He pushed open the hatch and walked into the cabin. When the passengers in the cabin saw Fang Tian, it was like seeing a savior, and they cheered, and some people even called him God. Yang Tian's hands pressed down, and suddenly, the cabin fell silent. Fang Tian said, "We are not safe at this time, the cockpit has been completely destroyed, this plane is not controlled at all now, I have a way to save you now, but please fasten your seat belts and wear an oxygen mask." Upon hearing this, some people became nervous. At this time, the aircraft, after the console was destroyed, was always going straight, and the altitude was gradually decreasing. But in the absence of control, it is obviously impossible to expect it to land automatically. However, as Fang Tian said, he already had a way, and now he just had to wait. Fang Tian flew outside the cabin and flew synchronously with the aircraft. The passengers in the cabin looked out the window like gods, and involuntarily prayed to him. 10 minutes later, the opportunity finally arrived. By this time, the plane had flown outside New York, and in the distance, drones followed them. However, this time the US military seemed to know that the Superman in front of him had no malice, so he did not attack him, but just followed from afar. Below the plane, there is an uninhabited mountain. I saw Fang Tian's eyes reddened, and a slender laser light shot out. Like a hot knife cutting butter, the two wings of the plane were easily cut off, tumbling and falling from 1,000 meters in the air. The plane was in midair, suddenly lost its wings, and suddenly fell like a stone in a parabolic trajectory. In the cabin, all passengers experienced the pleasure of weightlessness, and exclamations sounded from time to time. The Air Force personnel who were watching the UAV reconnaissance screen were stunned. What happened? Could it be that the purpose of this, Superman, is really to destroy the passenger plane? Fang Tian was unhurried, and his movements did not stop. After a few seconds, the entire cockpit, together with the cargo compartment, had been cut off, leaving only the cabin part. The person who monitored the screen suddenly realized that Fang Tian's true intentions were known. Sure enough, I saw Fang Tian at this time, flying under the cabin, supporting his hands upwards, and shouting, "Give me up." I saw that his face was bruised, and his hands were directly submerged into the shell of the away game, until he supported it with his shoulders and back, and did not continue to sink. This cabin, together with the passengers, has a total of tens of tons, but this is still within the scope of Fang Tian's flight capacity. I saw that the cabin height was getting lower and lower, and the speed was getting slower and slower. There was a loud noise and explosion not far away, and the entire ground trembled 3 times, that is, the cut part of the passenger plane landed first. A few minutes later, he finally landed on the ground. As soon as his feet touched the rocks on the ground, Fang Tian's expression relaxed. As long as it is on the ground, where there is borrowing, isn't it the same as playing with these tens of tons of things in your hands? Where there is a borrowing force, and where there is no relay, the concept is completely different. On the ground, Fang Tian could lift multiple things, looking at the power contained in his own body. In midair, what determines how much he can lift is the thrust that his ability to fly can produce. In that case, even if he can lift 10,000 tons, if the thrust of the flight is not enough, it will be in vain. In theory, as long as the thrust generated by the flight exceeds his own weight, it is enough for Fang Tian to fly, and now he can bear tens of tons of power in midair, which is really more than enough for him. Of course, this situation is not unchangeable. For now, there are two ways to change. The first is to deliberately acquire a flying skill. This situation may be improved. After all, the Imperial weapon flying is only an instinct generated after he is promoted to the magic weapon, and he is not a dedicated flying magic weapon, which will produce this situation. The second is that as his strength increases, his abilities will also improve accordingly. Of course, Fang Tian was not stupid to that point. Just to improve the weight in the air, he deliberately went to obtain a flying ability. After all, he doesn't have to play against planes in midair every day. What's more, in fact, in the situation just now, he had a better choice. That's the internal space. Now the space in his body, with a radius of more than 1,000 meters, let alone installing a passenger plane, or stuffing an aircraft carrier into it, is all trivial. It's just that he doesn't want so many people to enter his body space. Ever since he imprisoned the saber-toothed tiger, Fang Tian had secretly made a decision in his heart. In the future, the only people who can enter their own space are enemies except for their loved ones. And after the enemy enters, do not think about coming out. Among these people on the passenger plane, so many people suddenly entered a dark weightless space, the news will definitely leak out, and at that time, the root of his ability is likely to be analyzed by smart people. The passengers on this plane are not worth the price Fang Tian pays for it. What's more, Fang Tian played the game of cutting planes just now, and he was quite enjoyable. He casually turned the cabin in his hand upside down, causing the passengers in the cabin to exclaim, and Fang Tian laughed viciously. Throwing the cabin down, dozens of tons of cabin smashed on the ground around hundreds of meters trembled, and countless small pebbles jumped up from the ground. For the passengers in the warehouse, Fang Tian had nothing to say to them, and after leaving the cabin, he soared into the sky. After a long time, a passenger probe in the cabin probed his brain and walked out tremblingly. I saw that there was a strange mountain forest around, and there was nothing else except the rocks of the trees. As for the Superman who saved them, he has long been gone. A group of people walked out one after another, and when they saw the ground under their feet, it was like seeing their mother. They were very kind, and they couldn't wait to stick their whole bodies to the ground. Perhaps, from now on, some of them will travel and never fly again. After the fear, it is extreme excitement. What did they go through just now? After experiencing the hijacking of the robbers and the crash of the plane, he was finally saved by Superman and survived completely. At most, some people were bruised. But these injuries are nothing compared to the disasters they encountered. Some people have excitedly found their mobile phones and tried to inform the outside world of this explosive news. But I found that in the wilderness, there was no signal at all. Until someone shouted, "Aha, I found my phone, this is a satellite phone, we can talk to the outside world." Suddenly, there were more than a dozen people around the man. The man first dialed 911, and soon, the operator's voice came from the other side. "This is the 911 police number, what do you need help with?" The people around shouted, "Superman! We are saved! Let the government come to our rescue." The sound is so noisy that it's impossible to tell the difference. The caller called, "Quiet! Let me say, officer, we are passengers on the plane that was hijacked today at JFK International Airport, and we are saved." As he spoke, the man also became excited. "Do you know what we met? Superman, the Superman you know. Superman saved us." The operator on the other end of the phone listened to his excited tone and tried to comfort him. "Sir, please calm down first." Before he finished speaking, the person who called the police had already turned red. "What do you mean? Don't you believe me? I tell you, this incident is definitely real in front of me." Mr. Superman still smiled at me. "What is your police number? I must complain about you." In the police station, the operator in front of the phone smiled wryly. The news of Superman's appearance has already made a lot of noise throughout the United States. How could she not know? She just wanted to comfort the other party, but before she finished speaking, she was interrupted by the other party. However, the other party has just experienced the horror of the passenger plane, and it is excusable to be a little excited. Not to mention the person who experienced this firsthand, even if she herself has seen the scene of the Superman and fighter battle in the news, she is excited. Seeing the shell as nothing, it was directly hit by the missile, undamaged. How powerful. What's more, in order to appease the people, the government has publicly broadcast the footage taken by the drone, telling everyone that the passengers on the plane have been rescued. Watching Superman in the video easily cut the huge passenger plane into several pieces with hot sight, everyone was shocked. If he had used this trick when fighting fighters before, those fighters would have become garbage along with the pilot. The person who called the police said excitedly for a long time before the operator interjected, "Sir, please listen to me, I have fully understood and fully believed what you said." Now on the news, the scene of Mr. Superman's battle is still broadcasting. The government already knows your location, the rescue plane is already on the way, please be patient. When the man heard this, he closed his mouth in disdain. When I remembered it, how could something like hijacking not be reported by media reporters? Since there are reporters, the appearance of Superman must have been a riot, and everyone knows about it. Flying high in the air, the drone behind him is still following him without mercy. Fang Tian was a little annoyed. He was preparing to go home, he couldn't let this drone follow him home. His current identity is not a big secret, but only S.H.I.E.L.D. knows. If the US military knows, although Fang Tian is not afraid, won't he be annoyed to death in the future? Of course, he can move directly in space, in that case, no one can track him. Just remembering that when he saved people just now, the Air Force fighter indiscriminately opened fire like him, and now, he is still annoyed. Since they are so ignorant, simply teach them a big lesson. Fang Tian made up his mind, suddenly turned around, and rushed in the direction of the drone. In the sky, whether it is a passenger plane, a drone, a fighter, for the other side, it is a moving iron coffin, which can be destroyed at will. This drone is no exception. He grinned at the drone that was close at hand. In the distance, McGuire Air Force Base, the pilot who was operating the drone to track Fang Tian, felt bad for a while. Sure enough, suddenly, a big hand stretched out, and the entire screen turned pitch black. The drone pilot scolded angrily. "I knew it would be like this." Another Air Force officer watching next to him interfaced, "I don't know what those masters think. Is there nowhere to spend too much money? That's $23 million, and that's it." The car was destroyed, and the pilot, who was in a bad mood, also gloated when he heard this. "It's not enough, don't you see? And 3 F-22s, that thing, but more expensive than gold. One cost $150 million, 10 minutes, the loss of 3, enough for the heartache of those lords of the Ministry of Defense." At this moment, the pilot suddenly realized that something was wrong. Although the surveillance screen has darkened, the drone has not lost contact. What does this mean? It means that the drone did not crash at all. He was overjoyed and cried out, "Death has not crashed yet. Satellite positioning is still connected." Looking at the screen, the point of light representing the position of the drone, flashing and moving into the distance, he was a little puzzled. Where is Superman going to take the drone? Thinking of some possibility, he shouted badly and quickly contacted the commander in the base. "Sir, there is a situation." And said that Fang Tian, after approaching this drone, casually destroyed its radar and light spot system, and touched his chin. "I don't know where there is an air base near here. I remember, there seems to be one on the east side. Go over and take a look." The drone next to him, I don't know what model, weighs about 4 or 5 tons, the lower belly of the fuselage, 2 missiles hanging side by side. Fang Tian ignored the missile and dragged the drone towards the east. High in the air, with a wide field of vision, he flew for a while, and he really had a harvest. Isn't it an air base in the distance? At high altitude, the entire base is unobstructed, flat airfield, 20 or 30 aircraft of various kinds are parked, mostly helicopters. Fang Tian knew at a glance that this was definitely not sending fighters to attack his base. But it doesn't matter. No matter which base, isn't it all an American air base, as long as it can make him take a breath of evil. The drone in Fang Tian's hand weighed only 4 or 5 tons, but it was not small, with a wingspan of 20 meters, and he swaggered over, and he had long been discovered. At this time, in the base below, the shrill siren sounded non-stop. The commander of this base is now anxious. The live broadcast of Fang Tian and the F-22 fighter has long been spread throughout the United States. How can he not know? Because of this, he is even more anxious. F-22 fighters cannot match people, what can he do? Under the high-powered telescope, looking at the arrogant figure, he muttered, "What do you want to do?" Knowing that he is invincible, he cannot fail to do the vigilance action. Others evacuated urgently, 2 gunships took off urgently, and the heavy machine guns on board were aimed at the figures flying in the distance. At this time, Fang Tianji was carrying the drone and had already arrived over the base. In the 2 helicopters, someone with a loudspeaker shouted, "Superman! You have entered the no-fly zone, please retreat immediately, any dangerous action will be regarded as a provocation by the US military." Provocation. Without saying a word, Fang Tian dropped the drone in his hand. At a height of hundreds of meters, a behemoth with a wingspan of 20 meters was suddenly smashed down by Fang Tian with all his strength. What kind of power was that? Only listening to the boom, the ground shook, and with the firelight, the entire drone had completely become fragments, sharp metal fragments, at a speed exceeding the speed of bullets, splashing everywhere. On the flat airfield, there was an extra big pit, and 4 or 5 helicopters and a reconnaissance plane around it were shot in rags, and the sunlight passed through the transparent holes, shining on the dust, and became a strip of light. Fang Tian smiled slightly, and his voice was like thunder, as this considered a provocation. As soon as the words fell, 2 more explosions suddenly sounded below. The surrounding aircraft have once again suffered a wave of destruction, and they have become scrap metal, and even the value of repairs is gone. On the helicopter, the commander with the horn was dumbfounded. What is this situation? Don't play cards according to the routine. Obviously we shouldn't have friendly negotiations. You come and go, and finally take a step back from each other, see what you want, do I agree to it as appropriate? Why now, without saying a word, you directly smashed the plane. He even asked me if this was a provocation. This is simply not a provocation, it is a naked slap in the face. Anyway, this sir, at this time, felt a hot pain on his face. I saw that his face turned blue and white, unpredictable, holding the horn's hands, green tendons, and he couldn't wait to shoot the person in front of him into a sieve. But then, he felt powerless, this pervert in front of him, the missiles on the fighter bombarded the body, could not play the slightest role. Did he rely on these helicopters and reconnaissance planes to deal with him? Stop tease. Thinking about this, he finally bowed his head. I don't know, Mr. Superman, what is the important thing to come to us today? Fang Tian tilted his head and his face was full of innocence. If there is no matter, it's just that I saw that your Air Force's drone was lost, and I specially came to return it to you. After returning to Zhao, I've heard of it. Chapter 91. Finish returning to Zhao. What do you mean? Fang Tian kindly explained. It turns out that you don't know, I'll explain it to you, that is, if you lose something, I will return it to you intact. The commander looked at the mess in the base below, and his voice trembled. This is called intact. Fang Tian scratched his head embarrassedly, and apologized again and again. I'm so sorry, it's just that your heavy machine gun is pointed at me, making me so scared, my hand shakes, the plane will fall. I didn't expect that this thing was so brittle, hundreds of meters off the ground, it was broken like this. Suddenly, he seemed to suddenly realize, I understand. This must be just a toy. Am I guessing right? Otherwise, why would you throw it into the air? The chief wanted to argue, but Fang Tian snapped up again, you don't believe it. If you don't believe me, this height is nothing at all. I saw that suddenly, Fang Tian in the air fell like a stone in free fall. He got faster and faster, and finally seemed to pull out the afterimage. In less than a second, he landed on the ground, as if by coincidence, straight into a transport plane below. This transport plane, in front of Fang Tian, who was falling rapidly, was no different from a layer of paper, and his speed did not slow down at all, and he landed with a bang. The movement caused this time is even greater than the fall of a huge drone. Silently, the transport plane at Fang Tian's landing point was shaken into a discus. The whole ground rolled like a wave. Only then did the sound come from the shockwave, blowing the helicopter hundreds of meters in the air shaky. At a height of 100 meters away, the shock wave is still so powerful, let alone on the ground. I saw that those helicopters and transport planes, reconnaissance planes, and patrol planes, really like toys, were thrown high by the fluctuating ground and shock waves, and crashed to the ground. The airport is full of dilapidated aircraft and various auxiliary facilities. From time to time, there was also an explosion, which was that the ammunition and fuel were detonated by the impact. Except for the large pit in the center, the ground of half of the airport seems to have been plowed in potholes. The commander of this base looked at the scene in front of him and only felt like he was dreaming. Is this a free-falling movement? Why does he feel more like a meteorite? Fang Tian's figure had not yet arrived, and the voice had already come. Oh, in order to make you believe, I deliberately accelerated my speed and fell, but I didn't expect that all your places on the ground were toys, and they were gently blown by the wind, and they turned over by half. The commander looked at Fang Tian and trembled. You just said that you want to return the drone to the Air Force. Are you trying to take revenge on the Air Force? Huh, Fang Tian seemed to have discovered something. Is there still intact over there? Isn't it a toy? Let me try. The chief blurted out. Don't. But it was already late. I saw that in Fang Tian's eyes. 2 red rays of light suddenly shot out, and at a distance of more than 1,000 meters, the remaining only few planes, like tofu, were all cut into neat 3 pieces. On the incision, there is still a faint red light. At this point, the entire base, except for the 2 planes flying in the sky, the rest are all in ruins. None of them are intact. The commander in the helicopter almost burst into tears. He started as a handyman in this base, decades have passed, step-by-step promotion, every grass and tree in the base, he is very familiar with. Now, this base was destroyed in half an hour. It was the person in front of him who caused all this. Although this man is wearing a Superman suit, his abilities are similar to Superman, and he even saved the entire passenger plane. But in the heart of the chief, he is not a Superman, he is simply 100 times more hateful than a criminal. He forcibly suppressed the tears that were about to fall, and took out his grievances on the Air Force. Superman is obviously going to save people, why should the Air Force take the lead in provoking? Provocation is just that. The point is that in comparison, you have no way to fight back, and you try to follow each other afterwards, and finally provoke each other. In the end, he let himself be miserable. The more he thought about it, the more he felt the anger in his heart. Fang Tian looked at the performance of the person in front of him, and his heart was also a little strange. He destroyed his base, he should be angry with himself, how come later, he seems to transfer his hatred to other opponents? Or even more hatred for that object than for himself. I saw this commander leaning dejectedly on the seat of the helicopter and asked, do you know that we are not an air base here? Huh, he roared, we're the Coast Guard. Affiliated with the Navy. Did you know? And the Air Force is not a system at all. This is embarrassing. It turned out that after beating himself for a long time, he actually hit the wrong person. It's just that now that dozens of planes below have become fragments, it is impossible for him to glue them up. This base was full of planes, and he thought it was a base belonging to the Air Force. However, Fang Tian thought about it, anyway, it is all the US Army, and he is happy about the Air Force and Navy. Fang Tian apologized insincerely. Ah, this is very sorry, how about you go to the Air Force to compensate for the loss? Thinking about how the Navy and Air Force would fight each other in the future, Fang Tian suddenly felt that things were interesting. Just then, the chief's communicator rang. After he connected, he only listened to a voice from the other side. Hello Colonel, I am Colonel Marco from McGuire Air Force Base, you can become a martial artist and I am Marco. A drone from our base, after moving over your base, suddenly lost contact, do you know what happened? Quote exclamation mark. Marco of. You wait for me, I will definitely not spare you. The officer listened to the other party's words, became angry, and slammed the communicator onto the helicopter floor. Scattered parts jumped and splashed everywhere and fell from high in the air. Although he hit the wrong person, a bad breath had already come out, and Fang Tian didn't think about it, maybe this would make the US government feel more disgusting. He looked at the angry officer. Since you have contacted the Air Force, then I will retreat. Before the words fell, Fang Tian had already galloped into the distance. In the air, only 2 helicopters remained alone. Not long after, Fang Tian had already returned to the villa. Of course, he wasn't stupid enough to fly straight back from the sky. At that time, although the drone was destroyed by him, I don't know how many spy satellites were staring at him. This didn't bother him, He just found an abandoned building to cover it, and the spatial movement ability was used, and he easily left everyone's eyes. Originally, he went out this time to buy sodium peroxide and put it in the space to maintain the balance of oxygen. Unexpectedly, I would encounter such a thing as terrorist hijacking, make a public appearance in front of the public, and have a big war with the Air Force. Flying high in the air, he could hear with his keen hearing, and in the city below, there were countless TVs broadcasting news about Superman's life, and countless people were arguing about this topic. With his popularity at this time, it is not appropriate to appear directly in front of the public in a short period of time. Jarvis, help me order some sodium peroxide. How much does Sir need to order? This thing does not take up much space, plus in the space, as long as Fang Tian does not deliberately inject air, it is a vacuum state, and storing these chemicals will not deteriorate, so simply buy a little more at one time, saving trouble. Order me 10 tons. Jarvis is an artificial intelligence. Naturally he will not ask Fang Tian what is the use of buying so many chemicals, but just accepted the order. After instructing Jarvis, Fang Tian also settled a matter of mind and focused his attention in other directions. Outside, the news of Superman's appearance is making a lot of noise, and among them, the military is also quite uncomfortable and anxious. It turns out that Superman, who suddenly appeared, came to rescue the airliner, and the military took the initiative to block the attack on Superman. At one point, it is not known how many people scolded them. What's more, Fang Tian later went to retaliate against the Air Force, but destroyed the naval base, and the two sides confronted each other and were deadlocked, and I don't know how to solve this matter. However, I don't know whether it was intentional or unintentional, but no one mentioned the culprit who destroyed the entire base. This hijacking incident, Fang Tian was just addicted to being a Superman. In fact, he is neither Superman, nor can he be as busy as Superman all day to save the planet and humanity. The outside world was boiling, but he stood still. And just like that, a whole day passed. This time, things were so big, but I don't know what the reason was. S.H.I.E.L.D. didn't send someone to find him. Others don't know that S.H.I.E.L.D. must know the identity of Superman. However, since S.H.I.E.L.D. did not send someone to find him, he was also happy. It's tiring to find a way to fool Coulson every time. S.H.I.E.L.D. didn't come to the door, but another person came. That's Spider-Man. After Fang Tian solved the hijacking incident, he was already in the wilderness outside New York, and in addition to the trouble of finding the U.S. military base later, he did not fly back to find Spider-Man, but went home directly, until he called and told him his current address. Unexpectedly, today he came to visit. At this time, Spider-Man is just a dick who has not yet graduated. For this luxury villa, it is natural to look at the eyes. After seeing enough of the strangeness, he complained, "When you dropped out of school, you even said that it had nothing to do with Tony Stark. Now, you're a shareholder in Stark Industries. Moreover, you were really unrighteous yesterday, got up and ran by yourself. Do you know how long I have been surrounded by that group of reporters?" Fang Tian smiled. "You are Spider-Man, of course they will be very enthusiastic about you." Parker leaned on the sofa and drank the drink Fang Tian found. "The most important thing is that they don't want to interview me at all. You don't know, in order to get your news, those people are simply crazy and almost ripped off my tights." In fact, Parker came over today, mainly to thank Fang Tian. In the situation yesterday, Fang Tian promised to help him without asking what happened, which made him a little moved. However, seeing Fang Tian, laughing and complaining with Fang Tian for a while, his thoughts of thanking him faded. With their current relationship, thanking them in person is a matter of birth, as long as they take this matter into their hearts. The two were chatting as Tony walked out of the workshop. He has been concentrating on studying titanium crystals in the past 2 days, plus manufacturing steel battlesuits, but he said that he had turned a deaf ear to the matter outside the window, and he didn't even know about Fang Tian's limelight. When he saw Parker, he immediately exclaimed strangely, "Fang Tian, when did your taste become so heavy? I don't like women, but I like men." Fang Tian smashed the drink in his hand angrily. "Close your stinky mouth." Iron Man sideways dodged the bottled drink that flew in. "Let me see, who is this little boy?" "Jarvis." "Understood, sir." Jarvis connected to the internet and instantly collected Parker's information, and displayed it in front of Iron Man one by one. "Oh, Midtown High School. Fang Tian's classmate. Osborne Enterprises, Professor Connors, Professor Lizard. The more he looked, the more Iron Man felt wrong. Parker was also a little restless next to him. No, Jarvis, search deeper. Soon, more information appeared. Roadside shops, photos and videos taken by various reporters, netizens, traffic monitoring, etc., form an invisible web, collecting Parker and Spider-Man's action route. In front of this big net, everything is hidden. Tony stared at Parker. You're that fool Spider-Man. The tone is interrogative, but the expression on the face is affirmative. Parker quickly denied. How is it possible? How could I be Spider-Man? Iron Man looked bitter and bitter. Last time I kindly helped you and let you use our company's equipment to make antidotes, you fool, you suddenly shot me unconscious. Parker's face was full of embarrassment. You really recognized the wrong person. Suddenly, a pistol appeared in Tony's hand, and a shot came. How quick did Spider-Man react? In an instant, the past has been dodged. I saw this bullet, with a bang, shot on the sofa, but did not penetrate, just squeaked and flashed with electric sparks. It turned out to be a stun gun. Did I recognize the wrong person? At this moment, Spider-Man really felt embarrassed, and his face was hot. Just now he was still denying, and he was debunked in the blink of an eye. Parker did not have a thick skin like Fang Tian, and he could indifferently reverse black and white. Looking at the scene in front of him, Fang Tian suddenly interjected. Tony, you just said that you were stunned by Spider-Man's punch. Is there an extra dark circle? Tony then remembered that there was still a Fang Tian sitting in front of him. If this guy knew about this, wouldn't he be ridiculed to death? In a moment of thought, Tony denied it. What's the matter? I'm just joking with Mr. Spider-Man, right, Parker? If this matter can be revealed, Parker naturally can't ask for it. The moment nodded repeatedly. Fang Tian. In that case, why are you two still fighting so saber-rattling? Come, drink together. Two big men, not a deep hatred, drunk to the end, naturally called brothers and brothers. Tony couldn't help but show off. You are physically strong, I am just an ordinary person, but I dare say that in a few days, when my armor is completed, I will be able to beat you all over the ground to find your teeth. In comparison, Parker and Tony's physiques are naturally not the same after drinking so much alcohol. Tony has been dizzy, and Spider-Man still looks clear. However, he is also very interested in the armor in Tony's mouth, and he doesn't know what can make Tony boast about such a sea. Then I must see it. Tony patted his chest and punched the ticket. Soon, Fang Tian also said that he would make a battle armor, and then we would compare it well. Spider-Man naturally nodded. The three of them had a good drink, and in the end, only Spider-Man and Fang Tian were left to fight for wine, and Tony had already slid off the table and slept there. This kind of thing of wine, for Fang Tian, you can drink as much as you want, melt in your mouth, and drink 1,000 bottles in a row is not a problem. Spider-Man has a strong physique, and he is also not drunk in 1,000 cups. The two fought for half a pound and 8 taels. In the end, Parker was a little drunk, and the two quit. It wasn't too early, and Spider-Man got up to leave. When Parker left, Fang Tian kicked Tony lying on the ground. Okay, don't pretend, get up quickly. Of course, Fang Tian knew what the reason was for Tony's approach, which was nothing more than wanting to avenge the punch Spider-Man gave him. Iron Man got up and stretched. In the past 2 days, I am really tired. The titanium crystal you mentioned, the nature is really peculiar, and I still can't scratch my head. No one expects that you can study it in 2 days. What should you do? Tony was indeed tired, yawned and went back to his room. Iron Man's battle armor is almost finished, and Fang Tian is not slow here. He concentrates his attention on the internal space. After this period of refining, several materials were finally all refined. Just don't sleep today, get it done quickly. Fang Tian's mind turned, and the materials in the space merged with each other. As the materials merge, more and more titanium crystals are formed. Needless to say, the performance of titanium crystals is of course extremely powerful. But Fang Tian was not prepared to refine titanium crystals into steel armor just like that. Before refining, he had to process it again. This treatment, not for anything else, is still to strengthen its shock absorption performance. Fang Tian's method of processing titanium crystals is not his own original, but refers to the production method of metal foam. The so-called foam metal refers to the special metal material containing foam pores, which collapses and absorbs energy when the metal is impacted, so it has excellent impact energy absorption characteristics. Ordinary metals can be treated in this way, and this technology is used on titanium crystals, which complements each other. Because titanium crystals have much stronger elasticity than ordinary rubber, if the titanium foam is manufactured, when it is impacted, the pores collapse, absorbing energy and protecting the personnel in the armor. As a result, it will return to its original shape due to its excellent elasticity. Think about it, how powerful would that be? This is the unique advantage of titanium crystal materials. Even if it is a real Edmond alloy, it cannot make up for titanium crystals in this regard. In the space, I saw the liquid titanium crystal, which suddenly differentiated into a drop invisible to the naked eye and became a small bubble. Just like cell division, there are more and more bubbles in the air, and eventually a diffuse silver mist is formed. Immediately afterwards, these bubbles like cells touched each other, the cell walls fused together, stacked layer by layer, and in midair, an armor gradually grew out. Fang Tian took off this armor from the air and played with it. How effective it is, you still have to test it before you know. Fang Tian found a piece of plastic foam and stuffed it into his armor. Immediately afterwards, he slammed the armor in his hand against the wall of space. How strong are the walls of space? How powerful was Fang Tian's power at this time? Coupled with the fact that there was no air resistance in the space at this time, this armor was really like a shooting star, and it was accelerated to nearly 10 times the speed of sound in an instant. You know, the speed of the tank's shells is only more than 1,000 meters per second. That is, the speed of this armor at this time is even twice that of tank shells. In the vacuum, the sound could not be transmitted, but Fang Tian still seemed to hear a loud noise. The armor crashed into the wall of space, and was bounced back, spinning and flying rapidly. Fang Tian's figure instantly disappeared and appeared in front of the armor that was like a cannonball. Reaching out and grabbing it, he received the armor shell into his hand. Looking at it, the armor is naturally not damaged at all, and it is exactly the same as before. The plastic foam inside the armor, although damaged, remains largely intact. Good, it seems that this idea really works. Now this is just a piece of armor, plus plastic foam is too fragile after all, and it is normal to have some damage. If a warframe is made of titanium crystals of this structure, no shock absorption system is required, and the material itself is enough to protect the personnel in it, falling from a height of several kilometers without being damaged. This is comparable to Iron Man's steel armor. I don't know where to go. At the very least, it will not be like Colonel Rod's Steel Patriot. After falling from a height, he directly smashed the colonel in the armor into a half-body. Since this idea was feasible, Fang Tian naturally continued to act. In the space, silver mist is pervasive. One part after another, it grew out of thin air in the silver mist. A few hours later, all the main parts were complete. These parts are not only composed of titanium crystals, but also faintly flashing red. At this time, because in the refining process, Fang Tian made the refined red crystal into nano-sized fibers, interspersed with them, and used them as wires. As for the eyes of the face armor, the filling is naturally a refined transparent crystal. In fact, the crystal hole on the face armor was originally unnecessary, and after Fang Tian finished refining the entire battle armor, this battle armor would be equivalent to a magic weapon, not a product of technology. As a magic weapon, it will naturally not block the owner's gaze, and even make the owner's senses more sensitive. However, perhaps because of habit, he always felt that the armor without eyes looked very awkward, so he simply added a pair. Fortunately, this is not a difficult thing, it does not matter. Once all the parts are refined, the next step is to combine them so that they work together. There's nothing difficult about that. The accuracy of these parts generated by Fang Tian in space can be said to be very, very high, and each part is extremely standard. It seems that several invisible big hands with tacit understanding move at the same time, and one part after another flies out of thin air in an orderly manner, combining with each other. Dozens of seconds later, a complete steel armor appeared in front of Fang Tian. This armor, the whole is mainly silver, and there is a faint golden red color, which looks much slimmer than the steel armor of Iron Man, but it is similar in size to his portable armor. Now this armor is just equivalent to a solid shell, and it will not increase the user's strength in the slightest. The next action is the point. The first step is naturally to portray the spirit gathering array. In each part, Fang Tian superimposed 3 layers of spirit gathering array. On the whole, these spirit gathering arrays combined with each other to form a larger comprehensive spirit gathering array. Once this comprehensive spirit gathering array is completed, it is equivalent to combining all dozens of parts and linking them into a whole. Immediately after, needless to say, nature is the same, laser array. This time the laser array, Fang Tian not only used it as a method of attack, but also used it as a driving force for flight. Gather and launch, naturally, a weapon, indestructible. Let it diffuse, eject out, and fly at high speed under reaction force. Similarly, each part depicts a laser array, that is, the entire warframe can emit laser rays from all directions and can also flexibly change direction in the air. I have to say that the performance of the titanium crystal material is really good. When Fang Tian first refined the weapon, only 2 formations were depicted on the laser ring, and the material reached the limit. Now it is the same 2 formations, but the bearing power of titanium crystal is still left. Fang Tian thought for a moment and had a plan. I don't know if you remember that the first mutant Fang Tian encountered, Pulse, it had not been long since he came to this world, and he had not even reached the level of magic weapons. That mutant can emit a special energy pulse, the ability to temporarily eliminate the mutant, and can also affect some electronic instruments. Of course, this ability, Fang Tian, is useless, so the mutant was killed by him on the spot and refined with the newly acquired spatial ability. Now, what Fang Tian wanted was to portray this ability into a formation and join the battle armor. This is a killer tool against mutants. Fang Tian's own body has a limited vacancy, and his current ability is basically enough, so he has not acquired other abilities, lest he see more eye-catching abilities later, but he can't do anything and can't get it. However, the titanium crystal armor, which is outside the body, does not have this scruple. Moreover, adding this ability to the titanium crystal armor can also be regarded as a killer tool against mutants. Just do it when you think of it. It is still the same as before, and the same formation is depicted on each part. This energy pulse array was quickly described. Fang Tian began to continue with the last step, that is, to connect all the formations with each other. Under the guidance of the mind, the 3 formations hooked up with each other to form an isosceles triangle with end to end. At the same time, the whole armor buzzed and vibrate, and the light was magnificent. The light flickered on and off, as if breathing. The whole armor seems to have life. Each part of the warframe is equivalent to a magic weapon, and a total of 56 parts is equivalent to 56 magic weapons. If these are completely combined, it is not a problem to let it reach the magic weapon level. It's just that the armor at this time, flickering on and off, stopped at that point, and for some reason, dead or alive could not be promoted. Fang Tian's heart was anxious as he watched from the sidelines. There is a qualitative difference between magic weapon level and magic weapon level. This difference is not only reflected in the aspects of attack power and defense power, but more importantly, magic weapon level treasures can be integrated into the master's body, and some even have the ability to automatically protect the master. Looking at the battle armor that seemed to have life, Fang Tian's heart moved, and he had a guess. Could it be that this armor is stuck on the verge of promotion and can't move, because of insufficient spirituality? This is a very likely thing. After all, it is a combination of multiple magic weapons, not a one-piece molding, plus the materials used. It is also fresh and refined by Fang Tian, not naturally generated by heaven and earth, and the spirituality is naturally not as good as those materials that have experienced long years. Thinking of understanding this key, Fang Tian fixed his mind. The 3-dimensional true fire that had been shrouded in the battle armor kept on and flashed out of the space. Jarvis, do you have extra servers in your house now? A voice sounded in the loudspeaker. There is a spare server in the basement computer room. What do you need help with, sir? Immediately make a copy of your own program and put it in a spare server. Jarvis reminded. Sir, even if you copy itself, this program will not have intelligence, just a program, can only handle some simple events. Do you want to continue to copy? Needless to say, copy it right away. While waiting for Jarvis to copy his own program, Fang Tian was still paying attention to the armor in the space. In the refining process just now, the Samadhi true fire never stopped. It is also under the magical effect of the Samadhi true fire that the formation can be engraved inside the titanium crystal. At this time, the Samadhi true fire has not stopped, gently continuing to calcination, and the battle armor flashes in it, which means that the refining is not over. Once the 3 immortal true fire is stopped, then this refining tool will end here, and if you want to change it, it will be 10 times more difficult. Anxiously waiting, Jarvis finally finished copying his program. Fang Tian didn't care to say so much, directly transferred a space, entered the machine room, uprooted the entire huge server unit, and brought it into the internal space. For something like a program, Fang Tian wasn't sure if the Samadhi true fire could be refined. However, since starlight, sunlight, and metamagnetism can all be refined into magic weapons, it is estimated that the program is not a problem. Fang Tian's entire server was thrown into the Samadhi true fire, and he urged the true fire with all his might. In an instant, the entire server entity turned into blue smoke and disappeared. Although it could not be seen with the naked eye, through the induction of the power of space, Fang Tian found that there seemed to be something indeed wrapped in the real fire, looming and seemingly nothing. Fang Tian is overjoyed. Yes, this must be some of the spirituality contained in Jarvis's replicator. This bit of spirituality is not much, but it is enough to think about it. After all, the armor itself is on the verge of promotion, and it is only a little bit of spirituality. Sending this bit of spirituality into the battle armor, I saw that this trace of pure spirituality just entered the war armor, and immediately merged with the water milk of the war armor and became one. And the light emitted by the entire battle armor suddenly became stronger. Immediately afterwards, the harsh light became softer and softer, and finally stabilized. This titanium crystal armor has been completely refined successfully at this time. It was the level of the magic weapon, the same level as Fang Tian's body at this time. Of course, this is not that as long as someone wears this battle armor, they can face Fang Tian himself. Being a magic weapon, and being enshrined by others, is not a concept. Moreover, even if it is the same level of magic weapons, it is superior to each other. And Fang Tian's body is the strongest level in the same magic weapon. It can be said that even if he allows 10 titanium crystal armors to attack together, these attacks will not hurt him in the slightest. Even so, this armor is tough enough. At the same time that the armor was refined, he already knew the limits of this armor. Roughly speaking, the defensive power of the titanium crystal armor can be about 1/3 of his body at this time, and if it is output at full strength, the attack power can be comparable to the laser eye, but it can emit up to 3 laser rays of the same power at the same time, one in the palm of both hands and one on the chest. Of course, launching from the back is not impossible if you want. 168 small spirit gathering arrays, coupled with these spirit gathering arrays colluding with each other, formed a medium-sized spirit gathering array, which is enough to supply this battle armor, and it is not a problem to fight continuously for 2 or 3 days with high intensity. Coupled with the energy pulses it emits, it can be described as the nemesis of mutants and electronic instruments. Originally, this energy pulse was on that mutant, with a long emission interval and limited range, and was only effective against some electronic instruments, but on the titanium crystal armor, 56 formations were superimposed, and these were not a problem. This battle armor was refined by himself, and Fang Tian could be said to know it well. But after spending so much effort, he still had some itching, and he wanted to try the power of this armor. As soon as his mind moved, the titanium crystal armor automatically disintegrated and reassembled on him. Even the first magic weapon refined by Fang Tian, the laser ring, can automatically fit the master's finger, not to mention the magic weapon that this material elasticity is already excellent. I saw that after wearing this titanium crystal armor, it was extremely fitted, and the whole was silver white, and at the same time, the armor itself exuded a soft light of gold and red, illuminating a small space around it. The whole armor, piece by piece of metal armor, shaped like muscles, looks like a muscle, and from a distance, it makes people feel full of strength and sturdy. In fact, it is exactly that. Fang Tian felt it in his own space, and after this battle armor came on, with its boost, Fang Tian's own strength actually increased by about 1/10. Don't look at 1/10 of the inconspicuous, this is more than 30 tons. This is still the increase worn on Fang Tian's body. After all, Fang Tian's own strength is too strong, and the action is too fast. If ordinary people wear it, the effect will be more obvious. For example, now, although Fang Tian felt that his strength had increased, his physical flexibility had decreased a lot. For him, it's simply not worth the loss. After all, he himself is of a higher level. How can you train your armor and not pretend to force it in front of Iron Man? Fang Tian smiled and walked out of space. In the machine room, Iron Man was looking at the cracked concrete on the ground in a daze. This is the trace left by Fang Tian after uprooting the server, together with the shelf where the server is placed. He couldn't figure it out. You are talking about Fang Tian, what are you doing by pulling out the entire server? Fortunately, he pulled out the spare server. If he pulled the main server, wouldn't the entire laboratory stop running? At this moment, Fang Tian quietly appeared behind him. Tony, what are you doing here? Tony looked back, as if he had seen a ghost, jerked back, and his voice was shocked. Fang Tian. In the titanium crystal battle armor, Fang Tian's voice came. Why, don't you know me? As he spoke, the mask automatically bounced up, revealing Fang Tian's familiar face. Tony said incredulously, your warframe is finished. It's impossible, I didn't see you using any equipment at all. Did you rely on a hammer to finish this armor? Fang Tian smiled proudly. I'm not afraid to tell you the truth, I don't even use a hammer, I squeeze it with my hands. What are you kidding? Do you think it's kneading toys with plasticine? Iron Man looked like you were teasing me. You warframe, it won't be the same thing. While speaking, he approached Fang Tian, and his fingers tapped on the titanium crystal battle armor, making a sound of banging. Suddenly, Iron Man burst into laughter and leaned forward and back. Fang Tian looked at the side inexplicably. This Tony, suddenly crazy. Iron Man's stomach hurt when he laughed, before he stopped rubbing his stomach, looking very hard to hold. I was almost bluffed by you. You make a model, just tell me about the steel armor at this time. Stop being funny. But then again, your model is really realistic, the shape is also very good, there is a head, and when the technology is mature, I can also make a portable armor like you. Thank you so much, I didn't expect you to make people laugh. Was ridiculed by Iron Man, Fang Tian's face remained unchanged. Wait a minute, I don't know who mocked whom. How can you be sure that this set on me is just a model? Don't you tease, you still want to lie to me? Tony said with a proud face. After my observation just now, your armor is all solid, and there is no mechanical structure inside. Just like that, you still want to call it a steel armor. This suit of armor also has at least hundreds of kilograms, that is, you yourself are powerful, and if you change others, you can't walk. Fang Tian smiled slightly. Is it? Suddenly, the battle armor on Fang Tian's body automatically spread out, turning into dozens of parts, flying in the sky. When Fang Tian walked out, these parts automatically combined to form a complete battle armor. I saw this armor, and walked to the stunned Iron Man and patted him on the shoulder. You are still too young to know anything, so you can easily draw conclusions. Tony was stunned, pointing at the titanium crystal armor and couldn't say anything. How can it be? When the parts were scattered just now, I could see clearly that it was indeed a solid structure of blocks. There was no mechanical structure at all. How could it be automatically dressed and walk on its own? What's more, I know exactly how difficult it is to use this technology of automatic dressing. How could you possibly research it in such a short time? This is cheating, Fang Tian said with disdain. Stupid mortals will never be able to understand my wisdom. Iron Man was depressed. He has lived for so long, and it is the first time that he has encountered someone who despises his intelligence to his face, but he cannot refute it. Iron Man watched as the battle armor automatically dispersed, and then attached to Fang Tian, leaving him and flying out. Pretending to be forced in front of Iron Man, Fang Tian only felt refreshed. And Iron Man had no intention of caring about the server that was pulled out by Fang Tian in the machine room. Compared with the steel armor, the server is just a fart. The titanium crystal armor is a magic weapon that can theoretically be included in the body. But at this time, Fang Tian, after all, is not its real owner, so he needs to let this part scatter in order to dress. If you wait for the titanium crystal armor to really recognize the master, it will naturally float directly out of thin air with the owner's thoughts, which is extremely convenient. Even because it has a certain spirituality, When there is danger, the titanium crystal armor will automatically appear to protect its master. Iron Man looked at Fang Tian's titanium crystal armor, was deeply stimulated, and got into the workshop to assemble his own armor. Originally, his steel armor was almost finished, otherwise, he would not have provoked Spider-Man. At this moment, he was stimulated and made up his mind that he would not go out until the armor was assembled. In this way, Iron Man did not go out of the door, did not step the second door, did not sleep until the early morning of the next day, and finally finished making the entire armor. I saw that this armor, made of special alloy steel, was silver and white throughout, glowing with the cold glow of metal machinery, and its body was thick and full of strength. There is a ring in front of him that compares to a fist, where the heart of the steel suit is placed, the arc reactor. At this time, his eyes were red, bloodshot, and very tired. But the beloved Warframe is finally finished. Where can you sleep without testing it? With the help of the robotic arm, Tony put the steel armor on his body one by one. Finally, pick up the visor and buckle it on your helmet. Jarvis, are you there? Sir, what are your orders? Turn on the holographic display and start the self-test to scan your surroundings. Jarvis, right away. How? Okay, it's done. Iron Man, activate the simulated walk, check the appearance control. I saw the silver-white steel armor, starting from the back, and one by one the parts clicked automatically and merged again. Jarvis, the test is over, ready for the self-test after the power outage. Tony couldn't wait to say, Jarvis, first help me check the weather and air traffic control, listen to ground control information, and prepare for takeoff. Sir, before the flight, there are still a lot of tests. Tony interrupted Jarvis. Jarvis, do it first, this is our family credo. If it were an ordinary program, at this point, it would probably let Iron Man take off directly, but Jarvis is different, he is intelligent. Jarvis instantly analyzed the optimal plan. Sir, if you must fly, it is strongly recommended that you do it with Mr. Fang Tian to avoid danger. Iron Man pondered for a while, too, his first flight, how can he not be amazed by others? Okay, Jarvis, call me that fool, I'll let him have a good look at what a steel armor is. Fang Tian was sleeping in a daze at this time, and Jarvis's voice sounded, Mr. Fang Tian, Mr. Stark's steel armor has been made and is ready for test flight. He invited you to watch it together, do you want to agree to his invitation? Upon hearing this, the confused Fang Tian immediately woke up and became energetic. Tony's second set of steel armor is complete, what does that mean? This shows that he will soon have a steel armor to eat. Just thinking about it, his saliva was about to fall. Since coming to this world and refining himself into a magic weapon, he has been salivating over Iron Man's steel suit, and now, can he finally eat it? Thinking of Tony's Mark II, Fang Tian paid attention to the Iron Overlord made by Obadiah again. I just don't know, now that I live in this villa, how will Obadiah get the arc reactor? However, this Fang Tian does not matter, as long as Obadiah can complete the armored part of the Iron Overlord. Anyway, Fang Tian just uses it to eat, and does not want to use it to fight. Strictly speaking, in fact, Fang Tian has already eaten a steel suit, that is, the Mark generation. After he finished refining the titanium crystal battlesuit, the Mark generation had no reference value, and was naturally taken out of the space by him and eaten in one go. It's just that it may be because the production of the Mark generation is too rough, some are already tattered, and the taste is really not too good, but compared to ordinary steel, it is much better, which also makes Fang Tian look forward to the second generation of Mark more. As for what to do with Colonel Rod's war machine after Mark II was eaten by him, who cares so much? Naturally, eat first and then talk. He was still very attentive to Tony's test. Although in the original history, Tony's test was thrilling and wiped the ground, but now with his mess, who knows how things will develop. If Tony accidentally falls to his death, who will make him a big meal in the future? Therefore, he immediately said, I'll be there soon. If you say it's right away, it's right away. The spatial sense opened, sensed Tony's position, and in an instant, appeared in front of him. At this time, Jarvis had not finished reporting to Tony. Fang Tian's god is haunted, Iron Man has long been accustomed to it, plus he is in an excited mood at this time, he can't wait to fly, where is there so much care? Interrupted Jarvis's debriefing. Very good, let's take off. Fang Tian arrived, safety was guaranteed, and Jarvis no longer persuaded. Ready. 3, 2, 1, start. Suddenly, I saw Iron Man, dressed in silver white armor, with his hands and feet shooting out violent fire, carrying Tony and flying. Let's go. As soon as the words fell, the silver white armor adjusted its direction and rushed towards the underground passage with firelight. Fang Tian also didn't talk nonsense, and also soared into the sky. Of course, compared to Iron Man's fire, Fang Tian's flight was silent, but it was not slow at all. In Iron Man's excited ghost scream, the silver white armor turned sharply, with obvious trails, rushed out of the underground passage, drew a curved curve, and flew into the sky. Iron Man, who flew for the first time, was excited. At this time, the sky will be bright, and the fish belly has turned white in the distance. The operation is very smooth and the system is working properly. Fang Tian and Iron Man on the side flew synchronously, looking relaxed, which was far from his limit. Looking at the appearance of no one next to Iron Man, Fang Tian was quite bored, and couldn't help but knock on the back of the sleek head of the steel armor. I said, "Did you forget me? I am worried about your safety and get up early in the morning to accompany you to drink." Iron Man turned his head to look at Fang Tian beside him. With the steel armor, his courage also became strong, and he was competitive. Very good, Fang Tian, didn't you once say that you can't eat the exhaust gas of my steel armor? Now, do you dare to compete with me? Oh, Fang Tian was interested. How do you want to compare? Iron Man interface. Flying is not just fast. If you want to fight in the air, flexibility is more important. Why don't we come first than flexibility? Fang Tian couldn't help but smile and clapped his hands. Tony, you are seeking your own death. Without saying much, the two sides immediately began. I saw that Iron Man suddenly turned sideways, and the battle armor turned 90 degrees, rushing towards Fang Tian's direction. How quickly did Fang Tian react? Just look at Iron Man's actions and know what he means. There is a good way, and he also turns 90 degrees sideways, still keeping parallel to Iron Man. Tony's speed did not stop at all, and then came a fighter maneuver. The roller maneuvered, and in the extreme flight, the body rotated, turning like a roller. This kind of action, Fang Tian naturally does not have the slightest pressure. Next, Tony did the breaking S maneuver, the Cobra maneuver, and the Frolov roulette wheel maneuver. In this process, Fang Tian relied on keen reactions, and various movements were synchronized with Iron Man, without even letting him pull in the slightest distance. If someone looks from below, they will find that the two humanoid flying objects remain parallel from beginning to end, as if they were piloted by the same person. After making these actions continuously, even if Iron Man's Mark II has good shock and decompression performance, it still makes him a little dizzy. But how can such a strong Iron Man admit defeat? Take one last sharp turn and head straight into the bustling streets below. Jarvis, scan the streets and calculate the speed. In the blink of an eye, two figures flew side by side onto the street, 1 meter off the ground, and went upriver in the traffic. Cars honked their horns and crashed at high speed, as if they were connected into several lines. The two seemed to be performing acrobatics, thrilling left and right dodging, even occasionally through the underbody of the car. It was getting dark, and the residents on both sides of the road were already getting up one after another. An 11-12-year-old girl was brushing her teeth in front of the window when she inadvertently saw this scene. Suddenly opened his mouth, chin, even the foam flowed down the corners of his mouth, and he didn't know. Mom, come and see. Superman fights the Terminator. The young mother ran over with excitement on her face. Superman. Where is it? Where is it? Needless to say, this young mother is also an admirer of Fang Tian. She poked out the window and watched, but where was Superman? The young mother patted her daughter's head in disgust. I know that I am deceptive. As she spoke, she became intoxicated. A perfect man like Superman, how good would it be if I could see him with my own eyes? Look at his muscles, his hair, he can. The little girl was full of adoration. That's right, Mom, I support you. Hurry up and chase Superman back. I want Superman to be a father. It must be cool to have Superman as a dad. Just now, Superman must be protecting everyone and stopping the Terminator's plot. Fang Tian and Tony naturally didn't know about this little episode. If Tony knew that he was regarded as the Terminator of the destruction of the world for no reason, he didn't know how depressed he would be. If according to his own reaction speed, the warframe traveled against the current in the traffic at a speed of 300 or 400 kilometers per hour, and at this time the car would have been destroyed and killed. Fortunately, the steel warframe was loaded with Jarvis program, and Jarvis reacted extremely quickly, even in this case. It is precisely because of this that Iron Man is even more surprised in his heart. You know, the speed of human nerve flash is between 0.1 approximately 0.2 seconds, and even if it is a knee-jerk response without the brain, it takes 0.05 seconds. And what about computers? At least it is also milliseconds, hundreds of times or even tens of thousands of times that of humans. And Fang Tian, he can even have this nerve reflex speed. During the flight, Fang Tian felt a little bored. For him, this kind of action is just a small meaning. Ordinary humans have to consider the problem of overload when making various violent maneuvers, but for him, this action is 100 times more violent, and it can't make the slightest impact. As for the speed of nerve reflexes, Fang Tian didn't even know if there was such a thing as nerves in his body. While dodging a continuous stream of vehicles, he even had the spare time to grab a pineapple from a transporter. While slicing the pineapple with laser light, Fang Tian smiled and said, "How is it? Tony, do you want to take a bite?" "Ah, I forgot, you're still wearing armor, probably can't eat." I said, "You're too slow, like a snail. I don't wait for you, you can fly slowly yourself." As soon as the words fell, Fang Tian's figure had already turned into an afterimage and disappeared in front. In vain, Iron Man was indignant in the rear. "Snail? Who is a snail?" Jarvis reminded. "Sir, Mr. Fang Tian's speed just now is close to the speed of sound." Iron Man immediately shut up. What kind of perversion is this? Retrograde in traffic, can actually move forward at a speed close to the speed of sound, and can still eat pineapples on the side. Flew all the way to the end of this road. Here is a square. Fang Tian looked back and muttered, "This seems to be Times Square." At this time, the sky was not yet bright, but there were already many pedestrians on the square. Fang Tian was suspended in the sky, and from the ground, it was just a small black dot, and no one cared. After waiting a few minutes, Iron Man followed. While surprised by Fang Tian's speed and reaction, he was also very puzzled. "When did you change your clothes? Are you finally going to announce that your true identity is Superman?" It turned out that Tony had been burying his head in the workplace without leaving home these days, and he hadn't even seen the sensational news that Superman appeared in the United States. "I said earlier, I'm an Earthling, as for what you think, I don't care." Tony was a little skeptical. Jarvis reminded, "Mr. Stark, now Mr. Fang Tian, but the hottest figure in the whole of America, even you can't compare to him." "Oh, what happened?" On the virtual screen, Jarvis played the video of the plane crash. On the internet, the web pages discussing Fang Tian are overwhelming and endless. There are even fans who spontaneously set up a forum for Fang Tian, and their popularity is still very strong. Looking at it, Tony's eyes turned red. "With such a good thing in the limelight, you didn't even ask me to go with you." Fang Tian looked at Tony with disdain. "Just your small body, what are you going to do? Do you want to fight the robbers in hand-to-hand?" Also, his steel armor was not finished at that time. Iron Man's face remained unchanged, and he forcibly changed the topic. "Since your nerve reflex speed is so fast, dodging cannonballs is just a small meaning for you, why are you forcing the next? Really, do you have masochism?" The real reason, of course, was that all attacks could give Fang Tian an increase in strength, but this secret he would never tell. Fang Tian just said contemptuously, "If there is a fly that hits your steel armor, will you hide?" Listening to Fang Tian's pretentious words, Tony really had nothing to say. "I know you're strong, but it's a cannon, not a toy. Is it like a fly stinging a cannon on you?" Iron Man did not know that although his idea was not popular, it was not far away. Fang Tian was at the first mortal weapon grade level, and he was no longer afraid of ordinary bullets. The miniature submachine gun can only break his oil skin. Up to now, he has experienced 2 levels of magic weapons, and for him now, the 20mm caliber cannon is not even as good as a fly. At the very least, although the fly can't hurt people, it is disgusting. The chase between the two just now can be regarded as testing the performance of the warframe. To be honest, Iron Man was originally satisfied with his battle armor, but when he thought of Fang Tian's perverted body, he felt that the sun and moon were dull and deeply stimulated. When will he be able to fulfill his wish to beat Fang Tian and play with him? It seems that this day is really far away. Fang Tian saw that Iron Man was interested, and he lost interest in continuing the test, and couldn't help but remind, "Don't you want to test the extreme flight altitude of this armor?" If for his own reasons, Iron Man did not test this flaw, and in the future battle, he was accidentally killed by the pit, then his guilt would be great. Hearing Fang Tian's words, Tony also cheered up. That's right, maybe, I can also challenge the limit flight altitude of fixed-wing aircraft. Jarvis, what is the flight record of the State Route 71 Blackbird? Fixed-wing flight record, 26,000 meters above sea level. Good, the record is here to break, come on. As soon as the words fell, the jet port at the foot of the steel armor suddenly increased in flames and soared into the air. In Times Square below, someone casually raised their heads, as if they saw something, shooting stars. I can't help but stop and watch. Fang Tian took off with Iron Man without pressure. The height is getting higher and higher, and in the blink of an eye, it is 7 or 8 kilometers in the air. The air is getting thinner and the temperature is getting cooler. Of course, this has no effect on the sky. Jarvis reminded, Mr. Stark, the appearance of the armor may be frozen. Iron Man ignored it. Go on. I saw that on the steel armor, at a speed visible to the naked eye, a finger-thick layer of ice was formed. Finally, under the efforts of Iron Man, the thruster suddenly flashed several electric sparks, and then the entire warframe lost energy. Relying on inertia, the armor continued to rise for a few seconds, and fell in free fall under Tony's exclamation. We were frozen. Jarvis, hurry up and activate the ailerons. Only, Jarvis didn't respond. In desperation, Iron Man had to manually fumble and twist the emergency knob. The ailerons opened, he slowed down abruptly, and the ice was broken. According to the original history, Iron Man would have been able to solve this problem without risk. But at this time, with Fang Tian's chaotic entry, the situation was different. It is now above Times Square, with tall buildings. Seeing that the tall building below was getting closer and closer, the energy of the warframe had not yet been connected, and the roof was rapidly approaching, and it seemed that the whole Earth had shot over. If it falls, it will at least be a half-dead end if the warframe energy is not connected. Tony's heart was not chaotic, but he knew that at this time, he probably would not have any good results. At this moment, a familiar voice next to him remembered. Tony, at this time, hearing my voice, do you feel tears in your eyes? As he spoke, a huge force pinched the shoulders of the steel armor. The two continued to descend more than 10 meters before stopping. At this time, the roof of the building is already close at hand, and you can reach it by reaching out. Putting Tony down, he stumbled 2 steps, steadied himself, and his armor lit up. He said in shock, to be honest, this is the first time I feel that your hateful voice has also had a cordial time. Hu Tian narrowed his eyes. I'm usually hateful. Seeing Fang Tian's look of wanting to make a move, Iron Man quickly denied that he didn't want his battle armor to be dismantled in one day just after he was born. Wrong is wrong, it is respectable, respectable with kindness. Fang Tian nodded with satisfaction. The son can be taught. Ha, Jarvis said, Mr. Fang means to say, kid, you are very rich. Kids, Tony repeated in disbelief, you call me a child. Originally, Fang Tian didn't mean this, but when he thought about it, isn't the steel armor a fun toy for Iron Man? Seeing that Fang Tian did not refute, the little gratitude that had just risen in Tony's heart was immediately snuffed out by himself. I know that this fool in front of me is not worth being grateful for at all. Single quote. At this moment, an angry shout suddenly came from the stairwell of this building. You too. How did it come up? Don't move, raise your hands. A man in a security uniform, armed with a baton, walked out. He just saw the figure in front of him, and with a clatter, the baton missed and landed. Chow chow, Superman. Future warrior. Fang Tian and Iron Man looked at each other and smiled, and soared into the sky. On the empty zenith, only the security guard was left excited. I actually met Superman. After testing the armor and learning about a big flaw in the steel armor, even if he finally came to a high-altitude bungee jump, Tony was satisfied. The two returned to the villa together. As soon as he returned to the villa, Tony went headlong into the workshop. Jarvis, the Genesis company contacted, remodified the surface metal, using the gold titanium alloy of the Angel tactical satellite, reducing weight and improving strength. Iron Man is still the same Iron Man, of course, the aesthetics have not changed. In the end, he still chose the classic color scheme of gold and red. After seeing the renderings made by Jarvis, Tony was satisfied. Good, let's start making, finish and color. The first armor requires the debugging and production of parts one by one, and the speed is of course very slow. Now that the warframe has been fully developed, it can be handed over to Jarvis for automatic production and assembly, which can be described as countless times more convenient and fast. Only to listen to Jarvis. Automatic production has started, and it is expected to be completed in 5 hours. Tony looked at the time, it was already 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. He hadn't slept all night, and now, things were over, and he finally couldn't help but yawn. Notify me when the production is finished, I went to rest. After saying that, he went directly into his room and was silent. Stark Enterprises, in the 16th arrondissement secretly built by Obadiah. Stark's top CEO, Obadiah, was furious. You tell me, you can't make this thing now. He pointed to the huge arc reactor. The technology is here, I just asked you to shrink it, even this, you can't do it. The science officer's face was full of embarrassment. We have tried our best, to be honest, we can't do it. Tony can do it in a broken cave, with a bunch of scraps, you tell me it's impossible. Obadiah growled. After the roar, it still didn't help. Thinking of the two women, Pepper and Gwen, trying to contradict him at the company, he became irritated. Stark Enterprise was created by him bit by bit, and he will never allow others to take away his power. Thinking of this, he made up his mind. In the villa, Fang Tian was facing a woman. It has to be mentioned that this woman is a big beauty. I saw that her cheeks were white and red, and under her long eyelashes, she had a pair of fascinated blue eyes. Her eyes are smart, her eyebrows are sharp, and her femininity is mixed with heroism, which makes people taste more and more the more they look. In contrast, the same concave convex body is less conspicuous. You may not believe it, but this beauty is indeed sent to the door by herself. Self-recommended pillow seats, oh no, applied for a maid. However, in Fang Tian's opinion, what is the difference between applying for a maid and self-recommended pillow seat? According to her own words, it was she who occasionally saw Fang Tian coming and going here, and immediately recognized him as Superman, so she came to knock on the door. I saw this beauty, full of excitement at this time, as if there were countless small stars flashing in her eyes, and her eyes were shining. I know that you must be Superman, and I adore Superman the most. While saying, he also took the initiative to pull Fang Tian's hand and looked over and over there. It seemed that as soon as Fang Tian beckoned, she would immediately throw herself into her arms. Fang Tian's face remained unchanged, but he almost broke his belly with a smile in his heart. What do you say? It turned out that the girl in front of him, he knew, was one of the commanders of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury's right and left hand, Agent Hill. Some time ago, he publicly appeared in front of the public, which caused a sensation in the entire United States, making most Americans think that Superman is here. Fang Tian was originally still wondering, according to the urine nature of S.H.I.E.L.D. before, as long as he made a little movement, there would be agents immediately come to the door to investigate this incident, much more impact than the previous incident. Why did S.H.I.E.L.D. not move? But he didn't think deeply about it later, they didn't come, and they saved themselves trouble. Now it seems that there is an answer to the matter. It turned out that S.H.I.E.L.D. wanted to use beauty. Fang Tian's heart burst into laughter, but his face remained silent. He withdrew his hand. Miss, please be respectful. Hill didn't care, but squeezed a little closer, and said with a clever smile, Mr. Superman, you are alone, and you don't even have a maid in the family, how can this match your identity? What do you think of me? Fang Tian enjoyed the fawning of the beauty, but his tone did not let go. With Jarvis in the villa, it is completely enough, what can you do? Jarvis, bring this young lady a cup of coffee. Wait a minute, sir. Immediately, the coffee machine automatically operated, the round coffee beans were automatically ground into powder, and hot water was brewed. Madam, do you need sugar and fresh milk? Hill blurted out. Original, thank you. Not long after, the coffee had been brewed, and a robotic arm stretched out in front of Hill with coffee. Madam, the coffee is ready, I hope you like it. I have to say that with Jarvis here, a person will really become a lot lazier. This is artificial intelligence. Fang Tian did not answer. Look, what advantages do you have compared to Jarvis? Jarvis is at will, never reciprocated, and any order will be carried out to the letter. Hill looked at the coffee in front of him, gritted his teeth secretly, lay softly on Fang Tian's side, and exhaled hot air into his ear. However, I also have the advantage that Jarvis will never be able to do. Fang Tianxin said, this shield is really not a little new, a beauty plans to make it everywhere. When Captain America was discovered, he sent a beautiful agent to live next door to the captain and be the captain's neighbor. After Tony became Iron Man, S.H.I.E.L.D. sent Black Widow to be his secretary. To his own place, he actually sent Commander Hill. You know, Hill, this beauty, is not an ordinary spy, she is better at the overall situation and strategic arrangement, let her be a spy, it is really overkill. In fact, S.H.I.E.L.D. is also in a dilemma. This kind of thing, of course, is best left to the Black Widow, she is this professional. But on the other hand, Fang Tian had seen Black Widow again. This left Nick Fury in a dilemma. Fang Tian's identity has now become an absolute secret of S.H.I.E.L.D., and people who are not at the level enough must not be allowed to contact them. High-ranking people, mostly men, even if there are women, are crooked dates, or too old. In the end, Nick Fury hit his left and right hands, Hill, on the head. Coincidentally, Hill was really interested in Fang Tian, so he took this task. Fang Tian didn't know the twists and turns in this, but just lamented that S.H.I.E.L.D. wasted talents, and had no eyes. However, for this kind of mermaid sent to the door, of course, he will not really refuse, just now he was just pinching. He also didn't push away Seal, who was leaning on him, and said with a smile, oh. Have you figured it out? Do you have any advantages for yourself? It's not so easy to be my maid. Hill's eyes were silky, and he lengthened his voice. Of course, my lord, people. This master, really called Fang Tian's heart itched, full of crisp numbness. He put the matter on the spot. Very well, from now on, you will be an honorable maid. Hill looked at Fang Tian's enjoyment, and said viciously in his heart, unexpectedly, this Superman is also a color embryo, and when I touch it, it becomes a soft bone. Dare to take advantage of me, see that I want you to look good in the future. Single quote. Fang Tian picked up a novel on the table next to him and said leisurely, you haven't introduced yourself yet, what's your name? Hill's voice was delicate and soft. My name is Mere Mary, Mr. Superman, you remember. Fang Tian was funny in his heart. As an agent, the pseudonym was not completely changed, thinking that if the name was turned upside down, others would not recognize it. He said deliberately, Hill, this is your fault. As a maid, of course, you want to call me the master, come and listen to it more. At this time, both sides are not right. Fang Tian smiled secretly in his heart, his face was accusing, Hill gritted his teeth in his heart, but his face smiled widely, okay master, don't tease Mir, is it okay for Mir to apologize to you? After that, she added, also, my name is Mir, not Hill. Hill, Fang Tian smiled. Don't you know that it is common sense to untie your clothes when apologizing? Hill was stunned. What kind of common sense is this? How had she never heard of it? Just when she was at a loss, hesitating in her heart, whether to slap the face of the person in front of her, Jarvis reminded, Mr. Fang, there is a visitor outside, it is Mr. Obadi, do you want to let him in? Since Fang Tian obtained the permission of Jarvis, he had long cancelled the permission of Obadi's bald head, so Jarvis did not open the door directly. He was laughing with the maid who brought him with great interest, but he was interrupted, and he felt a little unhappy in his heart. However, he also wanted to know what this old fox was doing here, so he said, let him in. Obadi is outside the door, with a secret hatred in his heart. Tony Stark, what does this mean? Actually blocked yourself from the door. At this time, the gate of the villa opened. He adjusted his expression and walked through the door with a smile on his face. Is it Mr. Fang? What about Tony? Saying that, he placed the pizza he was carrying on the table. Fang Tian said, Tony didn't sleep all night last night, and now he is catching up on sleep. Hill, hurry up and get Mr. Stan a cup of coffee. Hill got up as usual and walked in the direction of the coffee machine. Hearing that Tony was catching up on sleep, Obadiah didn't want to propose to meet Tony. After all, disturbing someone else's sleep is immoral anyway. He seemed concerned. During this time, things in the company are very unstable, but don't let Tony worry too much, I will handle everything. Immediately afterwards, he said, Tony told me that he wants the company to switch to the direction of new energy, I don't know what his results are now. Fang Tian put on an expression of helplessness. I don't know about this, you know, although I am a shareholder of the company, I don't know anything about technical problems. At the mention of this, Obadiah dripped blood in his heart. You know, he has paid so much for the company, and he only has about 3% of the shares in his hands. Although it stands to reason that a giant group like Stark Industries, even after the stock plummets, these shares are worth billions of dollars, which is not less, but in his opinion, he has worked hard for the company for decades and only got this share, but what about Fang Tian? Rescued Iron Man casually, and instantly became the second largest shareholder of the company. In contrast, this simply made Obadi want to peel his skin. That's going to speed up Tony. Now the company is unstable, there are people on the board who want to drive Tony away, and if it goes on like this, I may not be able to hold on. Fang Tian knew that the so-called unstable human heart was that Obadiah was doing ghosts. However, in Fang Tian's mind, since he lived here, then Obadi had no chance to obtain the arc reactor at all. Even if he really had the inspiration to make the arc reactor, so what? It's just a food delivery. Therefore, he did not take the words of the bald head in front of him to heart at all. Instead, he returned, Mr. Stan, I wonder if you have heard of the Ten Commandments gang. Obadi was shocked. What happened? Could it be that his assassination of Tony was discovered by Fang Tian in front of him? In an instant, he made up his mind. No matter whether the person in front of him said this sentence intentionally or unintentionally, he had to start first and deal with Fang Tian and Tony first. Otherwise, once his collusion with terrorists is exposed, there will be no place to die. Making up his mind, Obadi remained quiet. Mr. Fang is joking. What the Ten Commandments gang? I have never heard of it. Since Tony is still sleeping, then I will take my leave, and when he gets up, please tell him my words. At this time, the grinding hill finally brought the coffee over. Sir, the coffee is ready. Obadi waved his hand. Sorry, I'm leaving. After saying that, without waiting for Fang Tian to retain, he got up and walked out. Obadiah was fierce in his heart. I still don't believe it. Is Tony the only one in this world who can make a small arc reactor? In the world, you are not the only genius. He originally wanted to get an arc reactor from Tony. But Fang Tian face to face, he really didn't have a chance. Although I don't know what Fang Tian is capable of, seeing that he can save Tony from the terrorists, there must be something special. Iron Man didn't know that silently, he escaped a catastrophe. Don't talk about them, but save Fang Tian. After Obadi left, Fang Tian put his narrowed gaze on his maid again. Hill, how do you say I should punish you? Hill is about to cry. It's been half a day. Are you still worried about the sentence that you didn't call the master? She bit her lip, as if she was very aggrieved. Chu Chu said pitifully, how does the master want to punish me? This expression really makes people think of bullying when they see it. Fang Tian patted his side. Come, sit here. Hill hesitantly walked over, put the coffee down, and walked on the sofa. Fang Tian lay down with enjoyment, pillowed on Hill's soft lap, and narrowed his eyes. Just right, the coffee is handed over to me, and you take the book and flip it to me. Fang Tian stood there, not honest, rubbing back and forth from time to time. Hill's body was originally stiff, and he was rubbed by Fang Tian, but he softened, and his face was as if he was dyed red, and he was ashamed and indignant. The ancients said that, green clothes holding inkstone to urge the question paper, red sleeves and incense to accompany reading, is the supreme enjoyment, and now, Fang Tian can also enjoy one of them. It's just that the book he read, of course, is not an academic work, but a martial arts novel in the world. Speaking of which, in this world, there is really Qi, and this book is directly regarded as true in the West. Although Hill did not recognize the square words on the book, she secretly paid attention and wrote down the title of the book. Maybe there's some secret here. In the gentle service of the beauty, time passed little by little. Hill casually asked, I heard you talk about the Ten Commandments gang just now. What is that? This kind of thing, Fang Tian is still willing to let S.H.I.E.L.D. know, and just threw the black cauldron that kidnapped Tony on Obadi's head. Of course, Obadi carrying this black pot is not an injustice. Fang Tian explained. Everyone knows that I rescued Tony from the terrorists, but no one knows the process. In fact, when saving people, I faintly heard the terrorists talking about the 10 Commandments gang, freedom fighters or something, and just now they were deliberately mentioned in front of Obadi to test his reaction. Hill listened to his words, not only did not feel excited, but wanted to break his mouth and curse. What's wrong with you? Such important information, Wen Coulson asked, but kept silent, pulling around, just not saying. Now it's about me, the maid I just met. If it is really a hungry ghost, when he sees a beautiful woman, he is fascinated. It seems that the Bureau used the beauty meter for this person, and it really used it correctly. Knowing this information, Hill was a little restless. Although her main purpose is to investigate what is the situation of the Superman of Fang Tian, this matter can be slowly thought of, and it is not difficult to investigate Fang Tian's appearance of seeing a beautiful woman without a word. The piece of information I just learned is different. Just now, Fang Tian had already tested him in front of Obadi. If this matter was really done by him, Obadi would definitely be alert. Even if he started first, it was not impossible, this could not be delayed. Therefore, she twisted for a while, and finally said, "Master, I don't know where the toilet is." At this time, she didn't want to make a fuss, even if she didn't want to call the master out again, she couldn't care less. Fang Tian casually pointed out, "Go over there, Jarvis will show you the way." A few minutes later, Fang Tian, with his keen hearing, heard the sound of running water coming from the direction of the toilet. Accompanied by the sound of water was Hill's slight voice, "Director Fury, have you received it? Contact me so soon." A voice other than Nick Fury came over. "You investigated Fang Tian's true identity so quickly." Hill lowered his voice. "No, this matter is not yet obvious, but I have another gain." According to Fang Tian, when he rescued Tony Stark in Afghanistan, he heard those terrorists finally say the words, 10 Commandments Gang, and Freedom Fighter, and he suspected that these terrorists were related to Obadi, the top CEO of Stark Enterprises. Nick Fury was also angry when he heard this. This Fang Tian, it is really not worry-free at all. Such important intelligence, why didn't you say it earlier? If he hadn't insisted on going his own way and sent Hill over, wouldn't it be possible to miss a big thing? Hill said again, "Fang Tian is still waiting outside, so I'll hang up first." Fang Tian withdrew his ear power and secretly felt self-satisfied. "Let you go and find out." Anyway, all the freedom fighters involved in this matter at that time had already seen God, and they could not implicate him. If it wasn't the entire class of terrorists who went to rob Tony at that time, it would be better. With the ability of S.H.I.E.L.D., most of them could find Obadi's head from the terrorists involved. At that time, he will not be able to take off this black pot. As for S.H.I.E.L.D., want to know your identity? Then let them guess. They can believe as much as they want. Anyway, they can't hurt a single hair of themselves. As for the bait they threw out, Fang Tian naturally smiled unceremoniously. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.